G'day, mate. 40 here. What a mess.
All right, everybody, I'm Dennis Prager. It's a dark day in the United States. Let me begin by saying that if some monster on the left had diabolical abilities to conjure up the best possible scene for the left to continue to destroy this country, they would have invented yesterday. The riot in the capital of the United States of America was a gift to the left and the Democrats that even they would not have imagined could have happened. It was beyond wrong. Somebody once said about something, and I wish I remembered exactly, but it made a big impact on me many years ago when I read it. It was worse than wrong. It was stupid. It was a mistake. The injury to the cause is incalculable. This will be constantly used as an excuse to morally defend the destruction of this country that will be engaged in further because the left has so much power. That's it. That's what they did. Now, having said that, I will analyze why some of them, I can't speak for all of them, did this, which does not fall into the realm of tout comprendre, c'est tout pardonner, that if you understand everything, you forgive everything. No, not at all. I don't think I could have condemned this in stronger terms. I was so furious yesterday that for the promo of the show, I think it was the only promo I ever recorded in which I yelled. I was so angry. It happened at the very, very end of my show. I didn't even know it was happening during the show. I never watch television while I broadcast because my concentration cannot be diverted. That's the way my mind works. I had been saying the right doesn't riot. The left riots. This wasn't a riot in the sense of looting and burning, and that, by the way, is not insignificant. There are gradations of evil, but it was made up for by the locale of where it took place. When I see a picture of a guy sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair, yucking it up for the camera, I can't take this person seriously. What can I tell you? What cause are you actually advancing by doing that? Smashing the glass of the U.S. Capitol? My side? The tarnishing of Donald Trump's legacy with these scenes? I wonder, I would love to ask them, did you have this in mind when you came to Washington? Was this part of your thinking? I will break down the windows of the United States Capitol and take over offices there. I don't know the answer to that. Now, having said that, I spoke to people, it was eye-opening to me. I spoke to people who are not supporting it morally, supported it emotionally.
Okay, so if you've been pushing the narrative of massive voter fraud costing Donald Trump the election, this kind of behavior is just the beginning, right? This is inevitable, this kind of reckless behavior if you hold that voter fraud cost President Trump the election. You can't argue on the one hand, voter fraud cost Trump the election, and on the other hand, you should be nice about it, right? Those are two completely contradictory messages, and one message is going to win out over the other. So if I tell you that your best friend screwed your wife, but you should be nice about it, okay, which of those two messages is going to have more resonance and more power and more influence over you? Which of those two messages is more likely to precipitate pro-social behavior versus anti-social behavior? Of course, the message that your best friend has been sleeping with your wife is going to overwhelm and make completely irrelevant any other message about, well, you should be nice about it. You shouldn't get too upset about it. You should be just completely play within the rules of the game. Once you argue that voter fraud cost Trump the election, then you are essentially arguing for extra legal responses. You're essentially calling for targeted assassinations. You're calling for violence. You're calling for criminal behavior. That's what you're egging people on to do. Telling people that the 2020 election was stolen is every bit as much emotional dynamite as telling someone that their best friend has been sleeping with their wife. All right? So all those people who've been arguing since the election that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump without providing evidence, right? They egged on the takeover in Capitol Hill yesterday, but they've also incentivized much more of this behavior. They've incentivized political terrorism. You can't say, on the one hand, the election was stolen and then say you should be nice about it, right? The message that the election was stolen is going to win out over every other message, just like telling someone that his best friend has been sleeping with his wife. That's going to win out everything else you say. You can say, John, your best friend has been sleeping with your wife for 2 years, and she's been doing things sexually with him that she would never do with you. And Jesus Christ is your personal savior. Okay. And I found so much blessing doing this particular type of transcendental meditation. Like, John, your best friend has been having an affair with your wife for the past 2 years, and absolutely nothing has been off limits to him. He's been after plunder your wife every way he desires. All the ways that your wife says no to you, she's been saying yes to your best friend. But I want you to know that I found tremendous peace and serenity through doing Kundalini yoga, right? The message that your best friend has been plundering your wife will overwhelm all other messages. It doesn't matter if you combine, John, your best friend's been plundering your wife for the past 2 years, but let me tell you about this healthy new diet. Or, John, your best friend has been plundering your wife for the last 2 years. And did I ever tell you about the emotional peace that I found through journaling? Or, John, your best friend has been plundering your wife for the past 2 years. Did I tell you about this great new synagogue that I joined? They have really powerful prayer services. Right? One message overwhelms the other. So all those people who've been claiming that the 2020 election was fixed, was fraudulent, right? You have inevitably set the stage for the potential of massive social dislocation and chaos. That message on its own may not be enough to ignite, say, mass slaughter or massive social dislocation and massive chaos. But for the past 7 decades, we've had the news media telling Americans, particularly Black Americans, you should be outraged at white racism. As a result, we have this highly disproportionate rate of interracial crime of blacks killing whites at a disproportionate rate. So yesterday, we had that one protester, the woman from San Diego. She was gunned down by a black law enforcement agent. So that's not going to get much attention, just like it wasn't given much attention when that white Australian 40-year-old lady in Minnesota was gunned down by that affirmative action Somali cop. All right. So when you supercharge people and tell them that they should be enraged, such as the media has been doing to Black Americans, you should get really angry. So the result of that has been tens of thousands of murders of innocent people in the United States. We've had an explosion in the black crime rate since the civil rights movement, because the media has been steadily egging on blacks, telling them you should be more enraged and more enraged. You should be really angry. The whole system is out to screw you over. So inevitably, people react to those messages. They get angry and they act out. And so as a result, we have astronomical rates of violent crime. Do I believe the 2020 election was stolen? No, I don't. If you do believe it, then I don't see any behavior that's off limits. If your premise is the 2020 election was stolen, then I don't see how you can then contend that anything is off limits. If the election was stolen, then you have the right to say so. Trump has the right to say so, and you have to go down. You have to go down that path because there's nothing off limits. If that election was stolen, nothing is off limits. Now, Robert says you're not looking at this from a Christian perspective. Turn the other cheek. Well, much of religion is about religious ideals. But if I tell a Christian your best friend has been plundering your wife for the past 2 years, but Jesus says turn the other cheek, which of those two messages is going to have the most effect on him? Which of those two messages is going to have the most emotional valence, to use an academic term, right? Who doesn't like valence?
Valence.
Valence. Valence. So emotional valence is the intensity, the degree of arousal. Okay, what is going to give you a more intense emotional arousal? Telling you that your best friend has been plundering your wife for 2 years, or that Jesus saves? Okay, the message that your best friend has been screwing your wife for 2 years is going to have at least 100 times more effect on the normal person, not even the unhinged person, the normal person, than the message that Jesus saves, or that Jesus says you should turn the other cheek. So valence or hedonic tone is the affective quality referring to the intrinsic attractiveness or goodness or averseness or badness of an event, object, or situation. The term also characterizes and categorizes specific emotions. For example, emotions popularly referred to as negative, such as anger and fear, have negative valence. Joy has positive valence. Anyway, the message that the election was stolen creates a certain emotional intensity and intellectual intensity and moral intensity whereby nothing is off the table. Once you push the message that the election was stolen, there are then no moral limits. You can try to say Trump's message yesterday was 2020 election was stolen, but you should be nice. Okay, out of those two messages, the message that the election was stolen, that has 1,000 times the power of the message of and you should be nice. Even if he devotes equal time to both messages, the message the election was stolen is going to have 1,000 times the emotional, intellectual, moral, and political impact as the message that you should be nice. It makes absolutely no sense that you should be nice if the election was stolen. If you believe that abortion is murder, then we have to go down a certain road. Now, you may not commit any criminal behavior as a result of your belief that abortion is murder. But if you don't really believe that abortion is murder. You're just saying something. So you may not truly believe that the 2020 election was stolen. And you may say it was because it meets certain emotional needs in you, or it's your way of saying how angry you are about reality. So you're playing a game. But if you spread that message to other people, they may not understand it's a game, right? If you hold abortion is murder, right, there's nothing that is then off limits to people who participate in the carrying out of abortions, right? There's nothing there. There are no moral boundaries, right? You say abortion is murder, and you also say, but you should stay within the law and you should be nice. The second message, latter message, has no power, right? The reason that tens of millions of Americans say out loud that abortion is murder, but then don't commit anything criminal, is they don't really believe it. They kind of split themselves off. Because if I told you there's an office in your neighborhood where 1,700 babies are murdered a year, you're not just going to write a blog post about it. You're not just going to tweet about it if you truly believe that that many babies are murdered. If Trump claimed it was stolen and it wasn't, then he should be prosecuted. Under what theory? Because I don't think there's any crime in saying things that are false. Now, if Trump claimed the 2020 election was stolen and it was not stolen, then he is guilty of revving up a crowd and feeding them to the wolves while, ostensibly disavowing violence. Right? This is Ricardo's point. But one message has 1,000 times the power of the other message. You're revving up a crowd when you tell them that the election was stolen. And everything you say after that about being nice and being pro-social is meaningless. Antifa infiltration. Discuss that part of the equation, somebody. I see very little evidence of that. And Antifa expert sees no evidence of that. If Antifa had been involved, you would have had mass burning and mass property destruction. The crowd that occupied the Capitol Hill was overwhelmingly very nice, very polite, didn't look like Antifa, didn't act like Antifa, didn't speak like Antifa. That's not to say that there weren't 3 or 5, half a dozen Antifa there, but there was almost no property destruction. There was almost nothing that you expect from Antifa at that event. Now, anyone who participated in that rush on Capitol Hill is an idiot. It was absolutely idiotic. All right? it was stupid. I can't imagine that anyone I know would be so dumb. None of my friends would be so dumb as to participate in that kind of criminal event, where there's a very high likelihood that you're going to get caught and you're going to get prosecuted. Right? I can't imagine that any normal Jew would participate in something like that. I can't believe that any normal Anglican would participate in something like that. I can't believe any normal mainstream Protestant would participate in something like that. I can't believe that anyone with an IQ over 120 would participate in something like that. Now, I know there are people with high IQs and who make incredibly stupid decisions. So I'm speaking in broad generalities, but in your life, you want to stay away from knuckleheads. Sometimes the knuckleheads have high IQs, but even online, you want to stay away from knuckleheads. Those people who've been conning you about how the 2020 election was stolen, they've just been telling you what you want to hear. And they may be acting out of their own emotional weakness, their own inability to deal with reality. But maybe it's time to shun them. Maybe you need to start turning your back on them, because people who have been telling you the 2020 election was stolen without sufficient evidence, and I stand here humble that evidence may come through this afternoon which convinces me that the 2020 election was stolen. So I change my mind all the time. If there is evidence that the 2020 election was stolen, I will look at that evidence very clearly and I will say I was wrong. Here's the evidence. But short of convincing evidence, all these grifters who've been pushing the notion that the 2020 election was stolen, these people are knuckleheads. They're antisocial. They have grave emotional disturbances that make them unable to handle reality. They've been either deliberately conning you or conning themselves, and thereby conning you. And they should be shunned, because what they're doing is creating a fire that will very likely kill a lot of innocent people, right? Without all these idiots online, many of them high IQ, pushing the notion that the 2020 election was stolen, that San Diego woman would not be dead, right? There are going to be a lot of people who I suspect will spend a lot of time in prison as a result of their knuckleheaded behavior. This knuckleheaded behavior was fueled, egged on, encouraged, created by idiots online, pushing without a basis, without a factual basis, without evidence that the 2020 election was stolen. Once you say the 2020 election was stolen, there are then no moral boundaries. All bets are off. Nothing is illicit once you claim that the 2020 election was stolen. Once you put forward this idea, once you implant this idea in people's minds that the 2020 election was stolen, you unlock absolutely everything in the human arsenal. People can then do anything. There is nothing that will stop somebody once they are convinced that the 2020 election is stolen. No limits, no moral limits, no boundaries, no restrictions, no common sense. Everything's on the table. Everything's a possibility. There's nothing so antisocial, so criminal, that becomes impossible to conceive of once you believe that the 2020 election was stolen. Once you hold that, all sorts of very dark things happen as a result. Now, you could claim once a person argues that the 2016 election was stolen because of Russian collusion, everything's off the table, that there's no limits to what they will then do. I don't think it's as powerful. I don't think it's as dangerous, because when you claim that the 2020 election was stolen, you're saying that the basic machinery of how America works, its political system works, was corrupted. So when you claim that Russia colluded with Trump to steal the election, at least you're claiming that outside forces colluded with just a tiny number of Americans to steal the 2016 election. It's wrong. It's stupid. It's destructive. It may have very well been a very effective tactic for people on the left to hold, but I'm not sure it is as socially destructive and as personally explosive and leaves people as open to criminal behavior. Because if you believe that Russia stole the 2016 election, then what are you going to do? Are you going to go, hurt Russians? That's a lot more difficult than turning your rage on American elected representatives or on the American political system. So stay away from knuckleheads in your real life, online, shun them, stop funding them, stop giving them your attention. They've been lying to you. They've been deceiving themselves out of their own emotional weakness. And I think they're primarily deliberately telling you lies. I think they have an emotional weakness, an inability to accept reality, and an inability to distinguish what is true from what is false. But why encourage them? Because this just may be the beginning of a very long, dark journey. I don't believe it's going to threaten the stability of America. And you can see that the Dow Jones went up about 500 points yesterday. Last I checked today, it was still going up. So that tells you that these riots are not particularly serious for America's bottom line, right? The people with trillions of dollars on the line don't believe that this occupation threatens America's well-being. Robert says, Trump had one job to do post-election. That was to save a Republican majority so that it could serve as a bulwark against the woke left. What did he do? Well, he destroyed the incentive of Republicans to go out to vote because he was pushing the message that the electoral system is rigged. You can't claim the electoral system is rigged against us, now you should go out and vote. That is a self-contradictory message, and one part of the message has much more emotional valence than the other. Carter says that woman died thinking Trump had her back and she was trying to have his back. Yeah. Now, she was an idiot, right? You should not have situations where she was leading a charge through a broken window to get into a secure part, I think, of the majority leaders section of Capitol Hill. So you should not have women leading the charge in physical danger. There were armed police all around. So first of all, no sane person should be anywhere near this kind of criminal behavior. Second, no woman should be leading the way into danger. That was absolutely insane on her part. She had a long record of very bad decisions. She was pushing QAnon. She was pushing delusional ideas about COVID and about voter fraud. Yeah, Trump handed them Georgia and with it the U.S. Senate. Yeah, if you believe that a zygote is a baby, then absolutely nothing is off limits in the war on abortionists. So most Americans say abortion is murder just to register how much they hate abortion. But they don't really believe it, or they'd be doing more things about it. The fall of the U.S. Senate is by far the biggest story here. Yeah, the fall of the U.S. Senate to the Democrats is 10,000 times more significant than this occupation of Capitol Hill. The occupation of Capitol Hill was captured on video. So it's emotionally compelling and it's exciting, but it's not significant. This was not the storming of the Capitol. It would join the Reichstag fire as an excuse to oppress. I cannot visualize my next 4 years as headed to prosperity. Before, America had a backstop, a defense against woke Democrats not in command. Now, nothing. Yeah, yesterday was the first time in a while that the right fought fire with fire. But was it effective? Okay, undoubtedly, emotionally felt good. But was it effective? Did it do good? Right? There's feeling good, and then there's doing good. So people, generally speaking, want to do that which feels good. People, generally speaking, are much less interested in doing that which does good. So remember Prager's condemnation of these looters? So in his Pragertopia description, he says if the left could have dreamed up something to truly damage the conservative cause, they couldn't have done it better than yesterday's riots at the Capitol. The left and the Democrats will exploit this story for weeks, months, and years. The left has now decided that riots are bad. They were fine all summer. What happened yesterday was utterly contemptible. Conservatives have no release for their frustrations. They just have to shut up and take it as they watch the left destroy what they cherish. If they speak out, they risk getting canceled. Capitol mob did great damage to Donald Trump's legacy. What the mob did yesterday was not only idiotic but stupid. That's not a good combination. Joe Biden believes that if the rioters had been Black Lives Matter, the police would have treated them much worse. Well, we know from police statistics that police are less likely to shoot black suspects than they are suspects of other races. So what was Prager talking about prior to this occupation of Capitol Hill? Because he has a role, along with other idiots in talk radio, fueling this this blind rage. So what was his last hour on radio Wednesday, January 6th? Fight on. Those of us who love liberty must fight on. What is our choice? Turn the country over to the left without a fight? So Prager has spent show after show talking about how the 2020 election was filled with massive voter fraud. And so once you push that message, this kind of behavior is inevitable. Right? You can't push voter fraud and then claim to be outraged by what's going on. So Dennis, his latest column was about the Sovietization of California. So if you believe that California is turning into the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, then there are no limits to your behavior. So January 5, Prager's column, I now better understand the good German. Prager writes, how does one explain the good German? The term used to describe the average, presumably decent German who did nothing to hurt Jews, but also did nothing to help them and did do nothing to undermine the Nazi regime. Same thing could be said about the average Frenchman during the Vichy era, the average Russian under Lenin, Stalin, and Brezhnev, and the millions of others who did nothing to help their fellow citizens under oppressive dictatorships. And he says the ease with which tens of millions of Americans have accepted irrational, unconstitutional, unprecedented police state type restrictions on their freedoms, including their freedom to make a living, has been sobering. So he says, who are we to condemn the average German who faced the Gestapo or the average Russian who faced the NKVD if we're not willing to face off with our political totalitarians? So Prager helped fuel this nonsense, and there'll very likely be a lot more of it. And Prager notes, snitches are lauded and encouraged in some Democratic-run states and cities in America, such as Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti saying in March, snitches get rewards, and by left-wing governments in Australia. Plenty of Americans, Canadians, and Australians are only too happy to snitch on people who refuse to lock down their lives. All this is taking place without concentration camps, without a Gestapo, without a KGB, and without Maoist re-education camps. That's why I no longer judge the average German as easily as I used to. Apathy in the face of tyranny turns out not to be a German or Russian characteristic. I just never thought it could happen in America. So Prager's writing a column saying that we're facing a tyranny. Right? If we're facing a tyranny, then nothing's off limits. If we're facing a tyranny, there are no moral boundaries. There are no barriers. Right? If you're battling a tyranny, then just get it on. There's nothing to stop you. So Dennis Prager and syndicated talk radio have a formula. Right? This is what brings in ratings. You outrage people. You will find when you tune in to syndicated talk radio, particularly on the right, by the time you turn it off the show, you will be more angry than you were before you tuned in. So it's bad for you. It's socially toxic. It's toxic for the individuals who consume it. But the people who pump out this toxic message, like Dennis Prager, like Mark Levin, like Sean Hannity, they get to profit handsomely. They get fame. They get fortune pushing this toxic product. Robert says, who screwed up Georgia? Georgia Republicans had their part. They nominated utterly useless economic traders like David Perdue, but in the main, it was Trump. What about the witnesses under oath witnessing the votes in boxes? Are they all lying? It's not convincing. Someone making an affidavit, right? I could make an affidavit that I saw 150 tons of cocaine was smuggled into Los Angeles yesterday via UFOs, right? Swearing on an affidavit means nothing. There's no force to that, all right? You can swear that you saw all sorts of things, right? Your claims have to be analyzed and validated by other sources of information. People making affidavits is not in and of itself powerful in any direction. Robert says Trump decided to take the world down with him. Ashley says Trump cucked and is closely monitoring the situation. So Trump said he was going to lead the march or join the march to the Capitol. And of course he didn't. He got into a car and watched the whole thing on TV. Robert says it's the fall of the Senate, not the civil disturbance, that is the main story. Trump handed Georgia with 2 Senate seats to the Democrats. Georgia. Trump told all his supporters to go home and follow the law, and then said Biden was legally elected when they stormed the Capitol. Yeah, you can't say the election was stolen and then tell people, oh, go be nice. Right? One message overwhelms the other. Luke, can you do a stream on the borderline genocidal contempt for Republicans that liberals have? Most Americans aren't politically active, right? Most Americans don't care that much about politics. The more committed you are to an ideology or to a type of politics, then you're going to have contempt for people who oppose you. So there's nothing unique in liberal hatred for conservatives. Conservatives feel the same thing for liberals. Yeah, Trump engaged in voter suppression. Yeah, by pushing the message that the system is rigged against you, you are discouraging people from turning out to vote. Is it stupid of me to say I'm jealous of some of those who peacefully entered the chambers of Capitol Hill? No. Just like it's not stupid of you to say that you're jealous of some of those who peacefully entered the chambers of their friends' wives, right? You may be jealous of guys who are engaged in all sorts of antisocial behavior. Like you may want to be macking, right? Part of you may want to be a pimp, and you may be jealous of pimps who get to treat their women rough and tough and knock them around. Part of you may be jealous of that. And it doesn't make you a bad person, all right? Like every man wishes, every healthy man wishes that he could sleep with a whole string of women. But if men actually got to do that, society would collapse. Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman says it was Trump trying to use the military for a coup. Yeah, that's absurd. There was no coup going on. Robert says Trump is an utter moron. He was right about some big issues, but he had no business being president of the United States. He never had the skill set. Trump is not good at running things. Most dangerous people in the U.S. politics right now, Democracy Now! And Vosh types on the left who combine far left stuff with identity politics and centrist liberal militarism. Well, you may be surprised about how dangerous some people on the right could be. Other than the Trump memorabilia, it looked exactly like Antifa. No, to me, it didn't look anything like Antifa. So press 1 if you thought that the crowd overrunning Capitol Hill looked like Antifa. Press 2 if you think they look nothing like Antifa. To me, they look very different. Antifa look deformed. There is a particular Antifa look, and these people overwhelmingly didn't have it. These people were frequently quite good looking. Wonder how many of these MAGA types on Capitol Hill will die from COVID-19. Well, 3 people died from medical situations like heart attacks. The elites just showed again they don't really care about democracy when masses of Trump supporters want change. That's absurd. Okay, 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. 100,000 people showed up in Washington, D.C. yesterday. So 100,000 people show up in D.C., and therefore the elites should just kowtow to their desires. Okay, about 74 million people voted for Trump, and about 81 million voted for Joe Biden. So if you really care about democracy, that means that you would support or accept the legitimacy of Joe Biden. I guess we should have some degree of compassion for leftists who think they're literally fighting Hitler. Well, how about having some compassion for yourself? Because if you have any honesty and self-knowledge, you'll realize that you believe all sorts of absurd things about the left as well. We have to protect democracy from our own masses of constituents and demand change in action, generic American sought-out politician. No. Overwhelmingly, Americans voted against Donald Trump. They allocated more than 7 million more votes for Joe Biden than they did for Donald Trump. Jack Posobiec tweets that Trump was going to march that crowd down to the Capitol. Given the context, I'd say the crowd acted completely rationally. Given the context of once you believe that the 2020 election was stolen, anything the crowd does is rational. There are no moral limits once you believe the election was stolen. Many lives were ruined by supporting Trump because he's racist. No lives were ruined by supporting Trump because he's racist. Lives were ruined by people who went public with their support of Trump, who went public in their support of Trump in a way that was ill-advised. The more prestigious your position in society, the more careful you have to be in how you talk about certain things. So if you're a plumber, you can talk a lot more honestly than if you're a college professor. But let's take that poor San Diego woman who got killed. She shouldn't have been there in the first place. She should not have been illegally occupying Capitol Hill. She should not have been leading the way through a broken window to try to break into a secure part of the Capitol where there are law enforcement all around with weapons. Right? Is there any cure for stupid? I mean, that's so stupid. Right? If there was any organization in this crowd, you should not allow women to lead the way. And she should not have been leading the way through a broken window when there are law enforcement all around with guns drawn.
And I learned a great deal. My dear friends, there are tens upon tens of millions of Americans, basically half of the United States, that feels that every institution in the country has contempt for them. And they're right. But you don't hear from them because the institutions that have contempt for these Americans, which is basically half this country.
Okay, so there's this widespread sentiment that we need justice for Lieutenant Ashley Babbitt. Or justice would say that she should not have been there and she should not have behaved as she's done. And it was just incredibly stupid what she was doing. Don't be in a place where it's illegal for you to be there in that situation where you're overrunning police barricades, and then don't lead the way into secure areas that are protected by people with guns. Right? Don't act like an idiot around people with guns. Right? You're not a saint because you repeatedly act like an idiot around people with guns, and then finally you pay the ultimate price. That's not the type of person we should be venerating. All right. She seized onto a whole bunch of ridiculous conspiracy theories, and they eventually cost her her life. Nobody forced her to believe in these conspiracy theories. Like, if she cared about her husband, her kids, if she cared about herself, she would not have gone to this event in the first place. It was a knuckle-headed, idiotic event. And then to rush the Capitol was particularly idiotic. Then to storm past police barricades, more idiocy. And then try to lead the way into a secure part of Capitol Hill where there's law enforcement there with guns drawn. All right? That's just stupid. No, I don't think we should be praising her, venerating her, holding her up as some heroic figure.
Deplorables, if you will, don't report it. The media considers Trump supporters to be rabble, including the intellectuals among them, Victor Davis Hanson, or Larry Elder, or any other name, or me, or more or less Ben Shapiro, even though he was an anti-Trump guy in the beginning. I was an anti-Trump guy in the beginning too, but not once he ran for office. By the way, he did a great job as president. That's the irony. He accomplished more good than any president of my lifetime. But it doesn't matter. Oh, so he brought peace between Israel and 4 Arab countries. So what? Oh, he had the best unemployment rate in 50 years and the best unemployment rate for black Americans ever since they've been recording these things. So what?
I agree with Prager that Trump overall has been a great president. Compared to the alternatives, who would you say has been better than Trump in the last 50 years? Now, if you believe that voter fraud cost Trump the 2020 election, then you have to blame Donald Trump for not doing anything about voter fraud that he's been talking about for the past 5 years. So I've just been following all these voter fraud idiots on Twitter. I've even unfollowed Ann Coulter, who I really enjoy. She's very entertaining. She's often very funny, but just pushing this idiotic, fact-free line that voter fraud cost Trump the election. It's time to let go of these people pushing idiocy. Okay, so there's this widespread fear on the right that we can have all these horrible things brought about because Democrats control the Senate, the House, and the presidency. Now, I don't think we're going to have new states. I don't think they're going to give statehood to Washington, D.C. or to Puerto Rico. I don't think they're going to pack the court. Yeah, that San Diego woman was foolish to go to this rally. She was foolish to go to the Capitol. She was foolish to barrel over police lines. And she was foolish to lead the way through a broken window into a secured part of the Capitol where there are law enforcement with guns drawn. Gilbert says most of the right-wing radio and TV commentators are responsible for Trump's reign of terror. What reign of terror? Where's the terror? The terror in 2020 has overwhelmingly been Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Black Lives Matter and Antifa have brought about 5,000 times as much terror as these buffoons on Capitol Hill yesterday. Robert says conservatives are morons, decade after decade, standing tall for lower taxes on wealthy oligarchs, free markets, open borders, free trade. That's the Republican Party for most of the last 30 years. Well, you have to compare them to the alternative, to Democrats. Republicans, for all their weaknesses, have been stronger on border security and limiting immigration than Democrats. When Trump said he could shoot someone and they'd still support him, he was right. It applies to those on the show yesterday, many in this chat, says Alt-Right Talk. Trump likely never expected to be president, and he governed accordingly. Apparently, Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL says Nick Fuentes is responsible for this attack on Capitol Hill.
And the people who he assembled today, George, it was a who's who of right-wing extremists. There were members of the Oath Keepers, an anti-government militia, an armed militia group, the Groyper Army, whose leader Nick Fuentes was there.
Okay, so Nick Fuentes urged Republicans not to vote in Georgia, and apparently he had a leading role in this assault on Capitol Hill. That's just complete idiocy. Complete idiocy. And Trad News says Nick Fuentes panicking begs Trump for pardon on Twitter. So here's Fuentes in the background there with Baked Alaska. Nick Fuentes was among the crowd of patriots who staged a largely peaceful protest at the Capitol building yesterday, January 6th. He even did a bit of live streaming with his old chum, Baked Alaska. Okay, Baked Alaska has been on such a self-destructive, antisocial binge the last few months. Why would you still support and make common ground with him? Now, that protest in which one woman was shot by a security guard is being spun by the media Charlottesville 2.0. Appears that serious charges are being prepared against anyone filmed or photographed trespassing in the Capitol building. Nick Fuentes seems to have realized his predicament and has started tweeting, asking President Trump to pardon all the people who broke into the Capitol building. Too bad Trump is no longer on Twitter. Nick Fuentes tweets today, President Trump must pardon any and all of his supporters who are charged in relation to the Capitol siege. I think that's a bad idea. There's no reason for Trump to do that. Blanket pardon like this seems extremely unlikely as Trump's final days in office are looking increasingly busy with moves afoot to impeach him. Furthermore, pardoning Nick Fuentes and other protesters would provide Trump's enemies with more ammunition to attack him before he leaves office. Looks like that Nick Fuentes will have to take his chances with the federal prosecutors, but you can see why he is worried. A small guy like him would have a very rough time in prison. Nick Fuentes is a smart kid with a tremendously high verbal IQ that has marked him out for greatness, but he has to realize that real intelligence consists in making fine distinctions between those things and people that lead in the right direction and those that don't. By choosing to maintain his association with asshats like Baked Alaska and Catboy Kemi, Nick Fuentes has shown that he lacks real intelligence and will thus ultimately fail. So during my approximately 3 years of nearly daily live streaming, there have been a lot of very steady progressions. Okay, very steadily cutting out people from the show, very steadily enforcing decorum in the chat and on the show, very steadily distancing myself, unfollowing, pushing away, pushing back against the idiocy that pervades much of the dissident right, becoming much more selective who I let on the show, becoming more selective about what we talk about and how we talk about it. And I think that's generally the right direction. When you realize that many of the people who share your worldview behave in an antisocial, idiotic way, you need to take action. So I'm not a big fan of cutting people out of your life, but how about just reducing the intensity, the duration, the frequency of your interactions with people who are set on such a self-destructive past. Alt-Right Talk says, I condemn raiding the chamber, but I would play the video game. Look, were you a thing on YouTube before this live stream? Yeah, I've been, not in a big way, but I've had a YouTube channel since 2007, and I've been blogging since 1997. Glib says, owning the libs will soon be declared unconstitutional. Look, this is not Nick Fuentes. Okay. So apparently this article is incorrect and not so apparently this is not Nick Fuentes. So I don't know if Fuentes was in the Capitol yesterday. So there are reports that he was, reports that he wasn't. To what extent did he encourage this type of behavior? I'll wait for the definitive word.
First thing they'll do is stop building the wall, because for the left, the more people who come into this country, the better. And there's no country to protect for the left, so it means nothing. An open border is fine. That's the definition of an open border. No country in the history of the world has had open borders in this sense. Maybe you didn't need passports in ancient Greece, but you didn't have vast numbers of non-Greeks moving into ancient Greece.
Okay, great question from James. What happened to Baked Alaska? What made him such an idiot? And it's such a typical journey of the perils of the e-personality. So Baked Alaska found he could get more viewership the more outrageous he was. So on the one hand, you can do a live stream where you have 17 live viewers, but your message is pro-social, responsible, rational, and is not going to lead people in a bad direction. On the other hand, you can do wildly entertaining live streams where you get 5,000 live viewers and you are toxic, right? What happens when you get online? Certain things immediately happen. You immediately become more spontaneous. You don't think through what you say and do nearly as much online as you do in real life. You become more narcissistic. You develop an exaggerated sense of your own capabilities. So narcissism means that you have more of a need for admiration and thinking of the other word for what's the term for the personality disorder where you have an exaggerated sense of your own capabilities. That's not narcissism. So you also become more morbid. You will share things online more easily, more frequently, and to a greater extreme that are very dark than you would in daily life, in regular interactions. So there are all sorts of currents as soon as you get online that all flow in a self-destructive direction. And you have to be pretty sturdy not to be carried away by these self-destructive currents when you go online. Most people become worse when they communicate online. Okay, most people become less civil, less thoughtful, less grounded in reality, more extreme. more morbid. They put less thought into what they're saying. They become more grandiose. That's when you have an exaggerated sense of your own capabilities. So I think the Baked Alaska story is a very typical story of the perils of the e-personality.
1-8-Prager 776-877-243-7776. When I heard Joe Biden's condemnation, my contempt for the man increased. And that's not easy, because he and his party are just destructive fools. 6 months he said nothing about real riots, the riots that come with stealing and burning and intimidating people, like Black Lives Matter marchers in various cities, intimidating people dining in outdoor dining.
He might not want there to be a secession movement. That's understandable, especially given his position in the ruling class. I can certainly understand his personal motives for not wanting that, but that's one thing. That's one thing to say, look, we don't want to go down this secession route because that would just be bad and make your case. But no, he's not saying that. He's just lying. He's saying there's no option. There's no possible way. It's impossible.
Okay, this is, what, black-pilled?
So that's, unfortunately, what you're going to get. Now, I wanted to talk about something else just briefly, because it is a little LARPy, and it is a little QAnon-y, ironically. But it just seems to be playing out. So this guy doesn't claim to actually be anyone that... I brought this up before. And I've sent it to people, and I feel weird sending it to people, because I feel like it lowers my... privately I've sent it to people. And I feel like it lowers my credibility, because it's an anonymous fucking 4chan post, or maybe it was from 8kun, I don't know, because the color scheme isn't 4chan-y. It's literally just a screenshot. But it's from October. It was from well before... I had someone send this to me before the election. And the theory that it put forth, it still lines up. It hasn't gone off script. And it's a little disconcerting, because it kind of makes a lot of stuff make sense. All right. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. And again, I'm going to preface this with, this might just be all bullshit. But the person who posted it, again, wasn't saying they were some kind of super secret agent. They were saying, look, this is what I think is going to happen. And again, is it a little LARPy? Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you know that it was posted, as I said, in October, I believe October 17th, then you might give it a little more credence. And again, I'm just being honest with you, this is a literal who. We don't know who this is coming from. But I'm just going to read a part of it here. I'm not exactly leaking anything, since you all would be able to discern this if you've been paying attention. I'll just cover the basics. Again, this is from October. The election results won't be announced the night of because of the mail-in counts. It'll be a tense period. Biden will be announced as the winner. He's obviously not the winner, and you will know that. It's going to shock the hell out of you. It's going to be the most demoralizing and unacceptable thing you've ever experienced. I also know that there are tons of sealed indictments. This is where it gets a little LARPy. And who they are for. And don't worry, it's not QAnon sealed indictments. He'll explain in a second. Long lists of names. Let me go down here a little bit. China has a lot of interest in this. And I know there's people who are like, oh, China, that's a boomer take. Look, obviously we all know that Israel has its dick and everything too. But you can't just say, oh, because Israel has its dick and everything. By the way, AIPAC jumped ship on Trump big time today. That investment paid off. But they're not the only ones trying to put their dick in us, okay? So anyway, China has a lot of interest in this. Back in January, February, a lot of guys from China were here trying to get everyone to believe in COVID-19. It worked for a few months, but unfortunately it kind of petered out. It's kind of complicated, but basically you were supposed to be locked down while Biden was announced. And I believe that. I think we were supposed to be locked down when the election took place. I don't know.
Okay, this guy's an idiot. We've got 500,000 extra deaths. You don't need to believe anything special about COVID. You don't need China coming over to tell you anything about COVID. We have 500,000 extra deaths in the United States in the last 9 months. You don't need to believe anything, right? That's the reality.
In support of their Marxist movement. Most anti-American, anti-white movement in American history. Let's see you white folks raise your hands so you can grovel for us. That will bring us joy, because when whites grovel, we feel better. That's what it's all about. Have white people raise their fists for BLM marchers. Anyway, did Biden say a word? No, you know what he started his tepid condemnation when he saw that polls were starting to shift.
Okay, so here's something quite disturbing from Washington, D.C. So the mayor of Washington, D.C. had the D.C. Police Department physically lock Trump supporters into their hotels in Washington, D.C. last night. Has this happened before? Mindy Robinson tweets, this was highly dangerous, unconstitutional, never done during Antifa riots. So watch the Washington, D.C. police here locking people into their D.C. hotels last night. I mean, how insane and dangerous is that? How much precedent is there for this kind of idiotic behavior? Locking people into their hotel? I mean, I know that sort of thing is reputed to happen in China.
Against him, and that was it. That was it. Trump said more to against this riot of the Republicans within an hour than Biden said in 6 months. Will that be reported in the mainstream media? All of a sudden, they're really angry about the rioting. Amazing, isn't it? Want to know the difference between Republicans and Democrats? Republicans condemn their rioters. There you go. There's a good riddle for you. Everybody has people who do bad things on their side. The difference is who condemns them, who condemns their own.
Dennis, you've been pushing the idea that the 2020 election was stolen. So once you accept that, then there's nothing off limits. There's nothing you can't do. There are no moral boundaries. Right? Once you make the case that the 2020 election was stolen, then everything that people do becomes morally permissible. I like Michael Tracy's tweeting. I think he has a lot of wise things to say. Michael Tracy is center left. And he wrote a couple of hours ago, only in your imagination was that an attempted coup. We are being told that a coup attempt no longer needs to be understood as constituting an attempt to seize control of the government. It had been generally the common understanding of the term before the events of yesterday, which caused the entire political and media establishment to go completely haywire. Is it unusual for a mob to breach the Capitol building, ransacking offices, taking goofy selfies, disrupting the proceedings of Congress for a few hours? Yes, that's unusual. The idea that this was a real attempt at a coup, meaning an attempt to seize by force the reins of the most powerful state in world history, is so preposterous that you really have to be a special kind of deluded to believe it. Or if not deluded, you have to believe that using such terminology serves some other political purpose, such as perhaps imposing even more stringent censorship on social media where the coup is reported to have been organized, or inflicting punishment on the man who is accused of inciting the coup, which you spent 4 years desperately craving to do anyway. So Democrats have been calling for a coup even before Trump took office. There were op-eds published in major publications before Trump took office, pleading with the military to take over. Trump's already been effectively banned from Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, a Rubicon crossing event in the suppression of political speech, which is being cheered on by all the usual suspects who otherwise claim to be stalwart defenders of enlightened liberal values. So just another straight thought. Any live streamer who consistently tells you what you want to hear is really bad for you. They're toxic for you. Because what happens in a live stream is that we tend to have shared emotional reactions, and those emotional reactions are far more intense than if we were just on our own, say, watching a replay. So when you watch a movie with other people or you watch TV with other people, your emotional reactions are considerably heightened. And so too, when you participate in a live stream, while it's going on live and you're doing it as a group, your emotional reactions are going to be heightened. And so it's really easy. That sort of situation tends to produce groupthink. And so if there's a streamer who's consistently telling you what you want to hear, they're probably running some kind of con job on you, right? The world is such a complicated place with so many moving pieces that are so far beyond the ability of any one person to understand that if someone is consistently telling you what you want to hear, they're bad for you. At no point yesterday was the American government at risk of being overthrown, as members of Congress have laughably suggested. Yeah, there was no coup here. There was no risk of the American government being overthrown. Per usual, our guardians of consensus can't bring themselves to describe what unfolded with any degree of dispassion or calm. Now, why can't people tell the truth? So that they have emotional reasons that supersede their ability to process and relay reality. So pretty much everybody wants to think of themselves as more capable, more powerful, more important, and more righteous than they really are. And so to see themselves as riding the white horse and playing some meritorious role in a dangerous time, they hype the threats that they have supposedly vanquished. We're told by the incoming Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer that January 6, 2021 will now live in infamy right alongside December 7, 1941. Elected officials issued emotional notices that they were okay, just like they had narrowly avoided being crushed in an earthquake or escaped from the World Trade Center on 9/11. This is made all the more odd because the only person upon whom lethal force was committed appears to have been a Trump-supporting woman who was shot point blank in the throat by a black Capitol Hill police officer. She's now dead. Congress was temporarily inconvenienced. I'm only saying black because the news media has so much of a fixation on whipping up black rage, black hatred, whipping up the lie that blacks are systematically discriminated against and hurt by this country. Journalists and pundits glorying in their natural state, which is to peddle as much free-flowing hysteria as possible. So yeah, that seems to be a key factor for successful punditry, is to peddle free-flowing hysteria. So if you watched Richard Spencer yesterday, he was telling you that this was, an awesomely important event that was just going to completely reshape world history, world power, that other states were going to completely recalibrate how they react to the United States. So essentially, the United States has lost its leadership role in the world, that everything's been turned upside down by the events of yesterday. So what's more exciting to take in on a live stream? Someone who tells you that the events unfolding before you right now live are just going to forever change the course of history, or someone like me who's going to tell you that 99% of the news doesn't matter very much, and that 99% of that which is hyped does not deserve hype, and most everything that happens in politics is not going to have that much, either it's not going to have much of an effect on your life, or there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it anyway. So to devote disproportionate attention to it only makes sense if it's a form of recreation for you. All right. So to be a successful pundit is essentially to shovel out to you as much free-flowing hysteria as possible. So, I mean, if you're watching JF or Tim Pool or all the major live streamers giving their opinions on political topics, there is this one commonality. They want you to be as hysterical as possible. They want you to believe that the world's coming to an end, that history's been forever changed by whatever event happened that day that they have the hot take on. And that's good for them. They get to make more money, have a bigger audience that way. It's toxic for you, and it's bad for society, but it makes them feel more important and gets them more viewership and gets them more income and gets them more fame and gets them feeling more powerful, even though what they're peddling, what they're trying to inject you with, as much free-flowing hysteria as possible. Remember this. Pundits, what is their job? To peddle as much free-flowing hysteria as possible, whether on the right or the left. Pundits eagerly invoke all the same rhetoric that they'd abhor in any other circumstances on civil libertarian grounds. Domestic terrorism, insurrection, other such terms now being promoted by the corporate media will nicely advance the upcoming project of making sure something like this never happens again. Use your imagination as to what kind of remedial measures that will entail. Trump's promotion of election fraud fantasies, I completely agree with that. Anyone who tells you that the 2020 election was decided on the basis of voter fraud is peddling a fantasy. And in all likelihood, they have some emotional inability to handle reality, and so they prefer to live in a fantasy world. Trump's promotion of election fraud fantasies has been a disaster, not just for him, but for his movement. It's obvious that a large segment of the population actively wants to be deceived about such matters. Yeah, so I get it. People want to be deceived. When I moved to Los Angeles in 1994 and I started auditioning for various acting and modeling roles, I wanted to be deceived that I could make it as an actor and a model. And so I got taken for thousands of dollars in classes and various schemes that weren't fully on the level. How did I get to be deceived? Because I wanted to be deceived. I wanted to believe that I could be an actor and a model. So there are all these people who are willing to feed that delusion in exchange for hundreds of dollars from me. So often betrayal, being lied to as a consensual act, you have some kind of sick incentive, some kind of dysfunction that makes you want to believe things that are simply not true. The notion that Trump incited a violent insurrection is laughable. His speech Monday afternoon that preceded the march to the Capitol was another standard fare Trump grievance fest, except without the humor that used to make them entertaining. Trump didn't command that his followers physically breach the Capitol building. In fact, after previously saying he would join the march, he seems to have just gone home to tweet and watch TV. So basically his normal routine on a typical day minus a trip to the golf course. Trump has never had the concentration, organizational acumen, or ideological coherence to mount a bona fide coup, and a mob intrusion which was swiftly dispersed by armed agents of the state doesn't change that. Shortly after the breach, he released a video instructing his followers not to take senators hostage or imprison Mike Pence, but to go home. No factions of the federal government joined the mob on Trump's orders because he didn't bother issuing any. The whole episode never stood the remotest chance of preventing the certification of Joe Biden, much less overthrowing the government. It's just another goofball charade, and in that sense, a fitting end to the Trump presidency. So there are many people who, in positions of power, would like you to believe that a real-life insurrection is genuinely underway, to develop a kind of exaggerated mythical understanding of what occurred at the Capitol, because that will enable them to seize additional powers, not through a coup, but through the vast inflation of an alleged threat, which is always how they do it.
We are in for a questionable period these next 2 years until there's a Senate election and a House election again. 11 million people will be made citizens of the United States, rewarded for coming here illegally. That's what happens when you change words from illegal alien to non-documented.
Those very same Democrat secretaries of state and Democrat judges just dismissed it. So there were a lot of doubts about 2016, and we pursued those doubts for 3 years. We had investigations in the House, the Senate, the media, and a special counsel. And after 3 years, we came to a conclusion that there was no collusion. And that very same treatment needs to happen today. And it makes people very suspicious and very angry when the entire power structure in this country says, no, let's not look at that election at all. So we need to figure this out so whatever happened yesterday never happens again, because that was a disgrace.
And we wait for the White House press secretary briefing to get started. Let's get Greg's thoughts before that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Jesse on this. Vandalism and looting, whether it's in D.C. or Portland, Soho, Kenosha, Minneapolis, Seattle, it's all bad, no matter who's doing it. So we must remain consistent. That's what makes us different from the rest. We don't play favorites with mobs. The other side does, but we don't. It's hard for me personally because I was outraged over violence every single day this summer. I saw my neighborhood trashed. Still, I condemn this equally because we aren't them. We are better than them. To this point, I heard a pundit say that even Republicans are outraged by this behavior. Duh. Republicans are always outraged by bad behavior because they consistently embrace law and order and condemn the destruction of private and public property. I do believe the Capitol is a sacred place. I also believe that the guy who invested his life savings in a small business, to him, that was a sacred place too. So it's consistency. By pointing out Republicans or non-liberals like me who are equally outraged by this behavior, what you're doing is you're pointing out also the inconsistency, right? The lack of Democrats who weren't doing this when our cities were in flame. That pisses me off. But what pisses me off is what happened yesterday. We're supposed to be the gate. The non-left, the Republicans, the Libertarians, the Conservatives, we're supposed to be the gate against the barbarians. And yesterday, we looked like the barbarians. And to Jesse's point, it doesn't help anybody, but you will not see Republicans bailing out those who were arrested. See, that is a vital contrast, and Americans know this. So Americans do not need lectures from hypocrites in hair and makeup who pick and choose their favorite protesters, right? So I'm glad that the Democrats are finally outraged by this disgusting behavior. Join the club. I've been there for a year. I do not play favorites with mobs. And also, Jesse is right. The 75 million people, their voices need to be heard exactly the same way Black Lives Matter's voices need to be heard as well. It just so happens that when you're on the Republican side or you're a Trump supporter, you will be held to a higher standard. That means that even though you don't burn down buildings or beat up pedestrians or harass people at their homes, going to people's homes, you're still going to be seen as worse as the people who perpetrate that. To Jesse's point, and then I'll stop, he's right. This is a larger, bigger problem. When President Obama talked to Trump and said, hey, your big problem's North Korea, you better deal with it now, this is the big problem that somebody's got to tell Gramps, that this is something. If you want to unify this country, Joe Biden, you can't sit there and act like the tough guy now. You've got to deal with half a country that feels that they have been disenfranchised, that they've been disrespected, they have been lied to by a media, they've been marginalized by a media. They've been made to feel small by a media. Their eyes are open. This is a red-pilled America. Yesterday was a bubble that burst, but it's a sign of a much, much, much larger problem. And it's going to come back in 4 years. It's going to come back if you don't deal with it, whether it is transparency in elections, voter ID, just being honest might be a start. And stop calling these people rubes and denigrating them because they aren't cool elites, because that's part of this too.
When he spoke to them on the ellipse and told them, here I'm using the words of his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, let's engage in some kind of combat. This to me is criminal. This is why it's domestic terrorism. And that's why I say I'm so emotional, because I love America, and what these people did was anti-American.
I wish you felt that way about the cities that were burning, Juan. I wish you saw that as terrorism. But
what
you
cities burning? I wish you would talk about. You know what? You have some incidents, and I condemn. Not only did I condemn the violence, but just think about this, Greg. You know what? Think about it, Greg. Joe Biden condemned the violence this summer.
It took him
from Donald Trump. He has yet. Donald Trump has yet to.
Okay, his condemnation was the weakest, pussiest, gayest, meekest, mildest condemnation.
Condemn what happened yesterday, Greg, and that is wrong. You and Jesse both condemned it, but I haven't heard that from Donald Trump.
Maybe you'll hear it today.
Let me get Katie in on. Katie,
take it away.
After 2016, after you planted that hoax about collusion, that Hillary hoax, and you manufactured evidence.
You know what? This is
your
nuts.
team did that.
You tried the United States intelligence community and said Russia interfered
to get to the bottom of that. Hold on.
Yeah. So
we waited 3 years to get to the bottom of that.
Let's talk about what's on the table instead of distracting from the issue of the day.
Dismiss the collusion thing after 3 months. You think you would have been okay with that? You wouldn't.
Let me just say to you, Jesse, what we have here is a case where people were lied to and told that somehow this election was not legitimate.
About the last election.
Jesse,
let me just make a couple of comments.
To not acknowledge that people were lied to and told that they could overturn an election, and they couldn't, and they resorted to violence.
You're wrong, and you didn't listen to a thing I just said. But I love you.
I do think that you'll have state legislatures. I think every state legislature is going to take up election issues. And in fact, they have been. Republican state legislatures have been trying for things, like Greg pointed out, voter ID. But Democrats have also been trying for things like expanded access. And I'm for access. I think that would be great as long as everybody is doing it legally. And I think that some of this convenience of mail-in balloting, and I have the unpopular opinion that at some point we're going to be doing it electronically from wherever we are. I think all of that is going to happen. I do think it is interesting that, the commission might be a fine thing to have. And if that encourages people to look back and say, oh, okay, it makes a lot more sense to me now. But if you read back through Andy McCarthy's work, one of the things that happened, that the President Trump's campaign was claiming one thing in public, but they were not actually using those arguments in the courts. And that's one of the reasons that they were losing. They weren't taking those direct issues that they were bringing up and taking them to the court because they didn't have the evidence at the time, or they didn't have enough time to get the evidence, or something happened. So there was that thing that was going on, and that the courts weren't able to then do anything about it. But also, Jesse, you mentioned that it was always a long shot that Pence could overturn it, but I don't even think that that's exactly right.
No, that wasn't even a long shot. No, Dana, that was more than a long shot. That was never going to happen.
It was like
that was never going to happen.
It was just like impeachment. It was just like impeachment. Do you guys remember that? Do you remember impeachment? Do you remember impeachment? We all knew he wasn't going to leave office. They didn't have the votes, but they did it anyway. Remember that? Good times. As COVID spread.
True. That's true. Katie, let's get you in here.
Yeah, in terms of this election integrity issue, I know Senator Tim Scott has introduced legislation, and I think that it would be wise of Joe Biden to get on board with it to create this election.
That's how crazy all of this has been.
Yeah, the decision desk declared it a month ago, so I already knew. Here's the deal. I don't understand why calling for an audit that Cruz wanted and Trump wanted is a call for an insurrection. It was a preventative, because I've said this 1,000 times, that when you remove dialogue or conversation or just going back and forth from the process, all you end up with is violence. And you have people who feel like there's no hope. And I think what we're seeing here is a lot of people with no hope. And I would like to coin a phrase. I think the genie is out of the bottle on this. There's no way to turn this back. You have millions of people who do not trust their institutions, and you know what? They're justified. You can't trust the media because they lie to you. You can't trust the elections because there is fraud. There is fraud. We don't know how much there is because every time someone brings it up, they're dismissed as conspiratorial rubes. We got to change, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Another phrase I just coined.
Yeah, really on a roll here.
Something Greg just said.
Original.
Greg, you had Gabe Sterling.
Where's that?
The media rightfully condemning yesterday's mob violence on Capitol Hill. But there wasn't much outrage this summer as America's major cities burned. The coverage was much more sympathetic. Watch.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Largely peaceful demonstrations in the face of law enforcement. It wasn't until night fell that things began to get a little bit more contentious.
So this is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Democratic cities are in chaos right now. Is this what you want from Joe Biden? And they're going to take your country away, and they're taking down the statues. And
crime is rising as they defund police.
Oh my gosh, it's so bad. And they're defunding police. It's like.
The Democrats don't want to defund the police anymore, do they, Greg? They were very grateful that the police were there to help them out yesterday.
Yeah, during the summer, they were very concerned about the optics of the police responding to threats, looting, violence. The police had to be essentially metaphorically handcuffed to keep from being seen of roughing up any of the the virtuous protesters. But here now they're demanding that the police step up to the plate because these are not their protesters, right? And again, this shows you that the media only covers what it wants to cover, and you don't get any say whatsoever. It bleeds right into the election fraud element. Because their guy won, there's no point. Meanwhile, they did it for 4 years because their gal lost. So what you're seeing is always what the media wants you to see. That is why we're at this predicament right now. This is why we're at each other's throats. It's because they've been creating the narrative of division. CNN especially. It's their monetary vision.
Hey, Katie, I think we have some sound from Anderson Cooper. If we can play that and you can react.
And they're going to go back, to the Olive Garden and to the Holiday Inn that they're staying at in the Garden Marriott, and they're going to have some drinks, and they're going to talk about the great day that they had in Washington, and they really did something and stand up for something. And they stood up for nothing other than mayhem and a man who is, in the despicable waning days of a failed presidency.
Oh, my.
Happened there. And I have a friend that works in Republican politics and worked on these races, and he said, we lost to 2 terrible candidates, and we better learn something from it.
Yeah, Greg, I'm going to make a prediction. The Senate is now split 50-50, but I think that the left is going to act like this is a mandate and that they won 10 seats.
I agree completely. They control the Senate, they control the House, and they control a very weak president, right? They control him. So my prediction is there will be no calls for unity. There will be no move to the center. There will be no, hey, we're all Americans, let's get along. They are going to exercise raw power, and they're going to use yesterday's events as their excuse to go in hard. And you're going to see this happen fast. They were already making lists of how to punish Trump supporters well before this. We reported on that. So you think it's going to get better? Because no, yesterday gave them an opportunity to go even harder on the people they hate, which is you.
So while Democrats were successful in turning out the vote, they've also changed the map in a lot of places.
Okay, let's see what else is going on. Brett Baer, special report. Brett Baer. Have to keep an eye on that. See all the news. Here are some of the comments on Steve Saylor's blog. So, first of all, a friend says, yesterday was a metaphor for Trump's candidacy and presidency. Trump said some stuff to stir people up. People acted based on his rhetoric. Trump was completely unprepared. Has no one willing to ruin their career for someone who inspires zero loyalty. Then Trump just disavows the whole thing and watches TV. And this is the exact moment the siege of the Capitol building began, as the 2 men in front ripped down a preliminary barrier, rushed officers who were behind a second barrier. They then encouraged others to follow their lead. Officers appear to have been taken completely off guard. Steve Saylor notes, it turned out that when you have only 4 cops to hold back a mob, and 2 of the 4 cops are women, well, for all intents and purposes, you still only have 2 cops. So who exactly thought that female cops was such a great idea?
Let's go! Fuck this shit! We pay your bills! You back the fuck off! You back off! Move! Move! It's our house! It's our house! We pay your bills! We pay for this shit we put up! For some bullshit! Come on, hold my backpack. Hold my backpack. Hold my backpack. Fuck, I can't hold on. I can't get it on. Hey.
Yeah, so when you have 4 cops, but 2 of the cops are women, in many situations, you only have 2 cops. Okay, here's some of the comments on Steve Saylor's blog. These kind of mob actions in Madison, Wisconsin went on for months in 2011, but they've disappeared down the memory hole because the mob was Democratic. So therefore, they were the good guys, not the bad guys. It's hard to remember facts that contradict the narrative. In contrast, the childish LARPers who got into the US Capitol today will, of course, go down in narrative infamy like the Charlottesville LARPers. They were the designated bad guys already, so their bad behavior plugs seamlessly into the prefab narrative. That's not fair, but it is how it works. Do Democrats now favor the use of facial recognition software for prosecuting the trespassers? Democrats have objected to facial recognition's use in prosecuting tens of thousands of Black Lives Matter looters videotaped doing undocumented shopping during the George Floyd mourning process, but perhaps they will now have a change of mind over facial recognition's use. Another question, how much rioting would there have been in D.C. if Trump had won? We can tell who is the main threat by the behavior of D.C. business owners who boarded up their windows during election week till Joe Biden was announced the winner. And you remember back October 6th of 2018, do you remember what was happening there when left-wing protesters were trying to lock down the Supreme Court and much of government over the Brett Kavanaugh situation? So, do you remember this?
These are live images, folks, at the doors of the Supreme Court, where you can see protesters have gathered. They are demanding that their voices be heard as they anticipate the person who will be a new Supreme Court Justice, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, to be sworn in here any moment. In a bigger picture, you can see approximately how many people who have gathered there. It looks like there are dozens, and they are chanting, "Kavanaugh has got to go," is what I'm hearing them say. You see, there is high security there. As we look at these pictures, I want to bring in with me here Ariane DeVogue and Julie Pace. Ariane, when you look at these pictures, having covered the Supreme Court for so long, have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, I'll tell you this, you're usually not allowed on those stairs. You're not allowed up there. We did see the night he was nominated, there was a peaceful protest where people were allowed to stand and sit on those stairs. But we haven't seen anything like this. And why it's particularly interesting is we believe that he's going to be sworn in behind closed doors with Chief Justice.
It's funny, they don't seem particularly outraged. It seems to be a whole different tone than the coverage of the MAGA rioters on Capitol Hill.
John Roberts giving him one oath, Justice Kennedy delivering the other vote, which of course is so poignant because not only is he taking Justice Kennedy's seat.
Okay, so the news media thought that was just dandy. When the left takes over government buildings, that's great. The left's been taking over government buildings for about 70 years now. Rare that the right wing does it. All right, here's some of the comments on Steve Saylor's blog. Few hundred losers. Yeah, anyone who participated in that march onto Capitol Hill is an idiot and a loser. Few hundred losers playing at being revolutionaries, going up against losers playing at being cops. Right, the Capitol Hill police were pathetic. Then chasing away a few hundred losers playing at being congressman, all over a loser playing at being president. This reminds me of that Jimmy Stewart movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but this one is more heartwarming. New York Times coverage today went out of its way to call the protesters violent. To some degree they were, but the difference from how Black Lives Matter and Antifa are covered was glaring, and this was the mildest violence. It was the cops who were violent, shooting dead that unarmed young white woman. The only solace I take from today's ridiculous events is that the protesters were mostly peaceful. It's bad that they stole stuff, and it's bad that they broke stuff, but at least they didn't shoot or hurt anyone or set things on fire. But between the Georgia loss and today's incitement and the ammo it hands the left for years to come, Trump is really saddling his supporters with a lot of baggage on his way out. Capitol cops don't really do much in the way of policing, so they are not stress tested. Anything off the Capitol zone is DC's problem. The White House is Secret Service's responsibility. I predict this woman's death will not be the spark for rioting. No chain big box stores will be looted. No bridges across the Potomac will be blocked with barricades. No graffiti will be spray painted under federal buildings and monuments. No statues will be tipped over. No churches will be burned, etc. The cop who shot her will not be doxxed. No mob will be sent to his home to terrorize the family. There will not be an arrest, nor will there be demands for one. MAGA will not act like BLM and Antifa, last year's pampered pets. For this self-control, we shall all be punished. While the news headlines are reporting something like armed rioting woman shot and killed, making it sound like the rioters shot and killed a woman, you have to read the fine print before you find out it was a cop shooting an unarmed white woman. If it had been a black woman shot and killed by a white cop in a left-wing protest, the headlines would be screaming, "Racist white cops murder unarmed black woman." The whole country would be up in flames. The Guardian in the UK has the word mob in no fewer than 5 headlines in the UK edition. Why are these people a mob? All right. Very different than the story put out by the Guardian for other events, such as when protesters led Trump into the bunker. So then they celebrated Black Lives Matter protesters driving Trump into the White House bunker. Very different attitude from the Guardian. The incident provoked a stream of derisive comments on social media, comparing Trump unfavorably both to the presumptive Democratic candidate Joe Biden, who visited protesters, and to the cowardly lion from the Wizard of Oz. Hashtag bunkerboy became a trending term on Twitter. So why no derisive contempt for the politicians who cowered in the face of this overwhelmingly peaceful MAGA mob? Greg Sargent writes for the Washington Post, President of the United States cowering in fear of delivering a national address while instead issuing deranged tweets from his underground bunker, somehow persuades himself that the world is laughing at someone else. Activist and author Amy Siskin was equally scathing. Trump hiding out in a bunker Friday, shutting off the lights at the White House Sunday, both over a few hundred protesters, will be forever remembered as defining moments of his presidency when he was revealed as a coward, not the strong man that he advertised. Seemed to be a very different tone than what the news media is putting forward now. I keep hearing on the TV that violence doesn't work. What? The hell it doesn't. Black Lives Matter spent the summer burning and looting every major city in America. They were rewarded with hundreds of millions of dollars and more power than any political party. Their adherents caused billions in damage, about $60 billion worth of damage. Black Lives Matter helped themselves to tens of millions worth of do-it-yourself reparations. No one lifted a finger to stop them. Yeah, violence works. Oh, and you senators and congressmen, cowboys, a little bit afraid. There was a loud and angry crowd outside and you thought they were going to hurt you. That's how a store owner in Kenosha felt. That's how the McCloskeys felt. Remember that emotion next time you feel obligated to barge in front of a TV camera to excuse rioting and looting. Next time you feel obligated to tell us how proud you are of Jacob Blake. Next time you get on Twitter and exhort your followers to donate to a fund to pay bail for rioters. You created this monster. You nurtured it, sheltered it, allowed it to grow, and now it's come home to eat you. Good luck and go F yourselves. So many of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa clowns who've been destroying America, they have not been prosecuted. So why should Black Lives Matter and Antifa get to engage in criminal behavior without prosecution? The thousands of people who committed criminal acts on the day of Trump's inauguration, they were by and large not prosecuted. Right? So how do they get away with it? And why should the MAGA crowd be prosecuted in a way the Black Lives Matter and Antifa engaging in far more destructive behavior? They get off scot-free.
Today, for so many reasons, the beginning of a movement toward a Bolshevik America. I mean, the fact that Facebook and Twitter lock out the President of the United States, do you understand what we're entering? A suppression of free speech, the likes of which has never occurred, ever, in the United States history. And they will use yesterday's Capitol riot as their proof for why they can do anything. I want to take your calls because I'm very curious to hear what you say. I'm sure many people are impassioned. Okay, John in Chicago, hello.
Hi. I have a bunch of quotes in front of me of Joe Biden condemning violence over the last year, but anyone with a computer can find those.
No, you can't. Wait. When did he start condemning the riots?
Well, sir, would you like me to read them?
Yes,
to you?
yes. Read me.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Huh?
Okay.
Yeah, the dates with the date and the source.
May 31st. May 31st. Protesting such brutality is an utterly American response, but burning down communities and needless destruction is not. Violence that endangers lives is not. Okay, that was on May 31st.
Right.
On August 30th,
So wait a minute. May 31st. That all right. I hear you. May 31st is after riots in March and April, and then May. So 90 days. If that's your first comment, it's despicable on Biden's part. Despicable.
You said that for months he hasn't said
Yes. So fine. That's 3 months.
On,
okay. That's 3 months. We both agree on 3 months. What is your next point?
Okay, I won't read you all 5 of them.
No, you're right, because we all agree. I'm trusting you that his first statement, which was not exactly widely reported, was after 3 months of riots. And
you know what? I don't know that to be the case.
It's the first you could find.
The article that I found, that's the first one.
Okay.
That's just in the article that I found. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
That's not definitive. May I ask you a question?
Please.
You said that your side condemns such conduct, but the president said the people who were drunk on his lies yesterday and attacked the Capitol building were special people, and he said, "We love you." Can you quote for me the president's condemnation of those people? Go.
He told them to go home peacefully. I wish he would have condemned them. That's correct. I wish you're right. You're right. So I'm agreeing.
That's wonderful. I feel so much better, Dennis.
Well,
I feel so much better now.
You didn't call to feel better. You called to explain why I'm wrong. I agree with you that they should have been condemned. What am I wrong about?
You are wrong. You said that our side condemns it.
That's correct. What did every Republican senator say?
Forget them.
Okay. The Republican senators condemned these people in unambiguous terms quicker than any Democrat condemned the riots, burnings, beatings, and lootings of the summer. Okay? There is no comparison between our sides. There's no moral. We live in different moral universes.
Mr. Prager, spare me your whataboutism.
Whataboutism? Okay, sir, I gave you a fact. Is what I said wrong or right? Okay, listen, I don't want to hang up on you, but if you can't respond to what I say, tell me what Democratic senator condemned the left-wing riots, what happened in Portland every night, for example, compared to every Republican senator yesterday, the same day, condemning Republican rioters. Give me an example. Sir, if you can't answer it, sir, I want an answer. I will hang up.
You're afraid.
No. Okay, goodbye. See, that's what they do. It's every time. You get them, and then they call you a name. That's what I know. They have no answer. Republican senators outdid one another yesterday in condemning these rioters. There's nothing comparable, nothing on the left-wing side, from the New York Times to any of the Democratic senators or congressmen or governors. The answer of Democrats to riots was defund the police. You know how many more dead people there are in this country because of Democratic mayors and Democratic governors? That means nothing to Democrats, nothing. Just like it means nothing to put people out of work for nearly a year. It means nothing because they all have their salaries. What was done yesterday was despicable by these people, despicable. But the reaction of our side is infinitely more decent than their side. There is no comparison, as I said, to this man who refused the dialogue, for good reason, I might add.
Okay, let's have a look at Academic Agent and what he has to say.
And have been predicting it would happen towards that I've seen, debunking any false narratives that have been out there, or blatant false fake news that I've seen that has been debunked, as it were. And then
So he's been claiming for months that Trump's going to stay in power, right? So, and he's been claiming for months without evidence that voter fraud decided the 2020 election. And let's have a look. This is a stream from yesterday.
Gesture towards giving some sort of take. Some sort of take as to what happens from here, what each of the two sides want to do, and so on and so forth. Many different takes. Obviously, this is happening in real time. And just breaking as I'm coming on air, that Donald Trump's Twitter account has been locked for 12 hours, and his most recent tweets have been deleted. Certain people predicted this would happen and have been predicting it would happen for weeks. Other people also predicted that January the 6th would be a big day, that likely it was going to be hot, and so on and so forth. So a lot of what we've seen, the fact that something big happened today was not a surprise. I think the manner in which it went down was a surprise to everyone. I said that I wanted something to happen. I wanted popcorn. I don't think I was disappointed in terms of that. Something definitely did happen. So why don't we go all the way back to this morning then? So that was about 4 p.m. British time, 11 a.m. US time. Trump gave a speech, and in fact, he took an hour to come on stage, and he played a very camp playlist, including such songs as Macho Man and Elton John hits, and so on and so forth. So he gave a fiery speech. He gave a speech in which he made it clear that he was not going to concede. He listed off all of the different accusations of fraud and so on and so forth. And
in that speech, I think any honest and objective look at what he said he hopes Mike Pence will do the right thing today. He's got a chance to show courage. And he said, I hope he doesn't let me down. But I'm hearing signs that he might. Basically, he said that in that speech. And then he said, and I thought this was it was a brilliant speech. He said, we're not going to take this anymore. This was he swore.
This was a brilliant speech. I mean, this is such low tier analysis.
One point he said, this is bullshit. He then said, listen, after I give this speech, we're going to go and march on the Capitol. And I've seen various people saying, well, he didn't go. He did. I mean, we watched it live. I was live tweeting it. He did call for his supporters to march on the Capitol. I don't think that we can pretend that he didn't say that. He did. So he was still giving his speech when Congress started. So that would have been what time? 1 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. our time. Then Congress started their debates, and Pence, right at the end of Trump's speech and just before they went to the certification, then released a letter, kind of a weak letter, saying he shares the concerns of millions of people about some of the concerns over the legitimacy of the election and so on and so forth. But he's had a long look at his powers, and he doesn't agree that he's the one who'll be able to do something about it, essentially. So then we went into the actual certification process, and obviously when Pence sent that letter out, everybody was like, Pence is pretty much going to refuse to do what Trump had asked him to do. And subsequently, some people noted that he stopped following Trump on Twitter. And then they went into the certification, and they started with, Alabama, Alaska, and of course, as soon as they got to Arizona, the GOP congressmen and senators objected. Ted Cruz was the senator, and I can't remember who the one of the replies, and he was invoking Jefferson. Linkley had gone into Mike Pence's chair, and he said, "Listen, we're going to have a recess here. We're going to have a recess." And the reason that they went into a recess is because, as all of this was going on, and I was watching, and I was live tweeting, and I was seeing what was going on. In the middle of all of this, the Capitol building was stormed by hundreds, if not thousands, of Trump supporters. And they had entered the building. So what happened? First of all, it was reported that Mike Pence had gone and run down a tunnel, and then it was reported that all of the senators, first of all, they kind of got into embrace positions under chairs and things, and then they were evacuated out of there as well. And then we saw some truly extraordinary things, sorts of images that we thought we'd never see in our lifetimes. There were various figures, including one guy who was wearing a Viking helmet, who got himself into the Senate. There was, they were all over the banisters outside, climbing up the walls. They draped Trump stuff. I'm just to show you a couple of images here when I get the chance. They got people into Nancy Pelosi's office. There was a guy who was sitting in Pelosi's office with his feet on the table. So essentially, they occupied the Capitol building. And and in the middle of it all, there was a woman who was shot. In fact, I think there were two different women. There were two different women who were shot, if I've got that right. And the one woman had put her hands up, and I don't know, maybe the police officer panicked or something, or in the fracas, she was shot and killed. And there was another woman who I believe peeked around the corner and got shot in the neck, and she was in intensive care for a while, but she has also died. So tell me if I got that right, people. Let's have a look. Baked Alaska was temporarily the Speaker of the House. There was two women, right? There was two women who were shot. One confirmed dead, and the other one just injured. Yeah, that's right. Okay. I actually thought I saw news that the second one was confirmed as well, but maybe not. And the reason I'm streaming reasonably late is because I wanted to, on a day like this where there's so much news flying around, there was so much stuff going on. I wanted to be, praise myself of the fact and actually see what the play is, okay? Because there's all sorts of stories going on, all sorts of takes, etc. So that's pretty much where we are now. And then, of course, there's been the reaction to the scenes that we've been seeing, and of course, a lot of the rhinos have been very quick to come out and say, I think the Team Trump line has been something along the lines of, well, this is not who we are type thing. Trump issued a video message on a tweet, which was actually censored by Twitter. I think they've maybe even deleted that tweet now, but they've deleted several tweets of Trump's and locked him out of his account for 12 hours. But he actually released a video telling people to go home and saying, it's like, I know you're angry, but go home now, leave this out type thing. So he did tell people to go home. I saw that video. There was some debate. I mean, I thought that it looked significantly earlier in the day because the sun looked to me as if the sun was shining on his hair. But as Silly Sailor pointed out on Twitter, it could just be a lighting rig, So anyway, he did issue that video, and then there was another part of it is that the DC mayor declared a 6 p.m. curfew and asked for the National Guard to come in, get them to stop, to cause enough of a commotion in DC that they would actually call off the certification tonight. Pelosi, because you got to remember, and then stop with each of the ejections and so on and so forth. I don't know, but effectively what this has done is that this has, how can I say? I think that the GOP thought that they could get through this with optics and with PR and with things that weren't real. I think that they thought that they could basically pretend that they were doing something without really doing it. Okay, and I think like Ted Cruz's plan, for example, was maybe he could push for a 10-day delay, and if he couldn't get that through, at least he could go to all of the MAGA guys and say, well, look, guys, I tried, but when I really tried, okay, and they thought, being swamp creatures, that would be enough. But what this has done, what the storming of the Capitol has done, is that it's actually made it much more real. It's made it kinetic. It's made it a matter that isn't just narrative. It's not just optics. This is real now. It's physical. It's these are thousands and thousands of people who you cannot ignore. To the extent where they're going to break down the doors of your palace and they're going to occupy your office, like literally sit in your office. That has happened. Okay. Now, a lot of people I've been seeing on Twitter say, well, this is bad. The optics are bad. But I'm not necessarily seeing it that way. I kind of went back and forth and I said, well, the optics in the eyes of who? The optics in the eyes of people who believe that the election was stolen, which is a huge swathe of people, is, well, this is the result of what happens when an arrogant, out of touch elite believe that they can do as they wish without any consequences. And my view is that this is...
Okay, unless you can make the case that Joe Biden did not receive the 7 million extra votes and that the election was stolen, then this analysis is pointless. I mean, Academic Agent has been consistently wrong on virtually everything he has said since the election. So he thinks that somehow this storming of the Capitol is some apparently amazing new movement to take back America.
This is the people showing that there are consequences. There is material feedback.
Yeah, there are consequences for what happened yesterday. So who's going to experience those consequences? Let's take a guess. Press 1 if you think that the biggest negative consequences for yesterday's event will be the Democratic Party and its leading politicians. Press 2 if you think the biggest negative consequences for yesterday's event will be people on the right. Okay, I'm going to say people on the right are going to reap far more negative consequences than people on the left for what happened with the storming of Capitol Hill. And I got it. It was kind of fun. It was kind of amusing. I see that point, but there are a lot more things that are important than what feels good. So Academic Agent, apparently he has a PhD. He's got a sophisticated British accent. You feel like you're getting a very sophisticated analysis, but what he's telling you is what feels good, and it just so happens to consistently be the opposite of what actually does good. So he's pushing a message that's going to feel amazing. Like a lot of people I know just love his videos, love his arguments because they feel amazing. If you're on the right, you're going to feel amazed, inspired, lifted up, energized by his streams. And that does have an emotional value. Like there's an emotional value in catharsis. The problem is that after that sugar high wears off, you are less equipped to deal with reality. Now, he gets more viewers and more income and more donation by feeding you toxic lies. But as you ingest these toxic lies, they're going to feel amazing. You're going to feel like you really understand what's going on.
For trying to get away with something like this. Now, the other side, the Democrats, are going to try to respond by trying to use this as an opportunity to persecute Trump supporters. They're going to try to steal the election. They're going to try to install Biden as the president, and they're going to try to use this as a kind of Charlottesville.
So he's been pushing the idea that Donald Trump will still be in power come January 21st. All right. So these are the grifters pushing trust the plan, All right, Trump's still going to stay in power. Got to trust the plan, and it feels amazing to take it in if you want to live in a world of delusion. Like if you want to deny reality and believe that up is down and down is up, if reality is so painful that you'd prefer to live in a world of delusion, then you should take in Academic Agent's live streams, because he will feed you a world of delusion.
To institute a set of Nuremberg trials. Do you remember I made that video about the denazification and de-Trumpification? They're going to try to use this to catapult, they're trying to cement their power and to cement this idea that what we're dealing with is a set of Nazis, essentially, who need to be dealt with like you dealt with the mid-century Germans in the Nuremberg trials. To which my response is, well,
okay, so to deal with Nazis like you did with the Nuremberg trials means capital punishment. I don't think actually there's any move to execute the people who participated in this.
Just try that. Just try it. How are you going to enforce it? How are you going?
Oh, how are you going to enforce it? Well, for example, Trump has been banned from Facebook until at least January 20th. He was banned from Twitter for at least 12 hours. He was forced to delete all sorts of tweets, his video. So they seem to be doing a really good job enforcing the repercussions of what happened yesterday.
Going to make that happen practically. When we're not dealing with one or two people here, and this is why it was so important for the crowd to be massive, for it to be like 1 million. I mean, I don't know how many people were there, but it looked like a lot. This is why the numbers matter. It's millions of people. It's not just one or two. This is quote unquote the people.
Yeah, 74 million people apparently voted for Donald Trump. I'm not the world's election expert, but apparently about 74 million voted for Donald Trump. 81 million voted for Joe Biden. What's your point here, Academic Agent?
Here, so there is a strength in those numbers, and there is an optical.
Yeah, sometimes there's a strength in numbers. When is there a strength in numbers versus a weakness in numbers? When the numbers are doing the right thing. When the numbers are doing something idiotic, stupid, self-destructive, antisocial, and criminal, there's not a strength in numbers. There's a weakness in numbers. If you get together with 15 of your friends to gang rape a girl, there's not strength in numbers, all right? The more people you add to that criminal activity, the worse it gets, right? He's making the argument that a gang rape with 100 people is far more impressive than a gang rape with just 15 people. It's not. It's worse. It's not better. It's worse. There's strength in numbers when you're getting together to do the right thing, to do the good thing, to do the moral thing, to do the pro-social thing. There's not strength in numbers when you're carrying out a gang rape.
People talk about optics. The real optics, the thing that your lizard brain will calculate, will clock. Oh, hold on a sec. It's that easy to get into the Capitol building and to sit into Nancy Pelosi's office and to occupy the seats in the Senate? It's that easy to get in there? Oh, so they're not impenetrable then. They're not invulnerable, these elites. They're not so out of touch. It's just, there just has to be enough people there, enough people with enough will. And so it has always.
So remember, he's pushing the line that the 2020 election was stolen. And he says, we just need enough will. What is he really saying? He's saying that there are no moral limits to how you should react to the 2020 election, that nothing should be off the table. Nothing anybody does in response to the mindset that Academic Agent puts forth is immoral, right? Nothing. Everything is on the table. He is saying essentially moral free reign, because once you push that argument, the 2020 election was stolen, right? Then there's nothing that limits your behavior. Any reaction to that supposition is legit, right? There's no way you can say that you should be nice and that has any power. Once you put forward the notion that the 2020 election was stolen, which he's pushing forward, then it just lets people off the hook. And not that decent people will use that, generally speaking, to commit evil, but it will allow a lot of unhinged, marginal people with just a little bit of a hold on sanity and reality to lose their hold, just like that poor woman from San Diego who fell into the QAnon nonsense, to the Stop the Steal nonsense, to the COVID hoax nonsense, and she's ended up dead, right? So people are going to end up dead from the type of thinking that Academic Agent so eloquently articulates.
Always been throughout history. throughout history, it's always been the case that if you have and this is why it matters, right? This is why the actual result of the election matters. Because if it is really the case that Joe Biden has 80 million people strongly behind him, then, well, the Democrats are probably sitting pretty. They can probably get away with what they want to do.
Nobody's saying that Joe Biden has 80 million people strongly behind him. Most people don't care about politics, right? This is just a delusional fantasy. Nobody's made the argument that Joe Biden has 80 million people strongly behind him, right? Most people cast a vote and then they get on with their lives. They're not obsessed with politics. Joe Biden didn't need strong support. All he needed was people to vote for him as a preference for them against Donald Trump. Sometimes it's which of the two candidates do you hate the least, right? You don't need strong support. All you need people to do is to vote for you to win politically and to win in life. You don't need everybody to love you as you go about living your life. But your life will be easier and more effective if you reduce the unnecessary hatred that you could easily generate by being careless and instead maximize the affection, or at least the tolerance that other people have towards you.
But if it's not really the case that 80 million people voted for Joe Biden and actually it was 75 million for Trump, and well, then it really does matter, because how are a minority going to be able to enforce their will on the majority in the
very easily. All right. No country depends upon the majority of its citizens to be politically active on an ongoing basis. All right. The country is run by elites. All countries are run by elites. Joe Biden does not need the active support of his 80 million voters.
The way that they are planning to do. They could do it in 1945 after the Allied powers had occupied Germany, and literally blown up Dresden, and that's a very different situation. It's a very different situation. This situation is actually Trump supporters got into the Capitol building, stormed into the palace, and occupied it to the extent where they were able to delay Congress from doing what they wanted to do for a significant period of time. That's what happened. So they're going to they will try to use it as leverage. And I agree with those people saying that. My point is, well, is that going to work? Is that going to work? Let's pretend now they try to speed through the certification tonight. Is that going to be legitimate in the eyes of the people? Is that going to be like, well, hold on a second.
Yeah. So remember, Academic Agent has stated for weeks now that Donald Trump will remain in power January 21, 2021. And pretty much everybody else who's on the side of sanity and reality said that no, Joe Biden's administration will take power at noon Eastern time, January 20th. So we'll find out very quickly and definitively who is completely delusional and who lives in reality.
The fact that they stormed the Capitol doesn't actually change any of the details about the election fraud or what the senators and the congressmen were objecting to. Because I've already seen moves by the likes of Mitt Romney and Pelosi and so on to try to use the argument that because this has happened, we just need to speed through it now. I mean, is that going to go down well? Is that going to fly with all of the angry patriots? I don't think so. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going to happen here. But my view is that the laws of politics and the laws of power have never changed. I mean, it doesn't matter what the system is. It could be democracy, it could be monarchy. The laws of dictatorship, the laws of power don't change. And what we've seen tonight is a real live demonstration of the fact that the laws of power do not change. The people literally stormed the corridors of power and they said, listen, you think that you can ignore us. You cannot ignore.
Okay, so what are the rules of power? What are the laws of power that he's talking about? Well, Wall Street was going up yesterday and today. Why was Wall Street going up? Because nobody who's in reality thinks that what happened yesterday is a serious threat to the stability of the American political and economic system.
We live in different moral universes. All right, Los Angeles, Lily, hello. Los Angeles, Lily.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Dennis, I am so surprised. You're such a brilliant man. Why are you calling these Republican rioters? If you look at the photographs, if you look at the man, the sewage that was sitting at Pelosi's chair, it is more than obvious that this is Antifa.
Why is it obvious?
The way they are dressed, the way they are covering their faces.
What percentage of the people who went into the Capitol do you think, Lily, were Antifa?
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Well, I'm not sure about percentages.
Well, but that matters, doesn't it?
Okay, Elliot in car test stream. Let's see. Come on, man.
A story about that building,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think I can tell it now. So I'll take you to Mark Zuckerberg's house. How's that?
Great.
Won't that be exciting?
Wow, I'm really excited now.
Okay. Do we have any people in the audience?
I think we just have Hickman Warrior at the moment.
I've been 13 years. Then I came back in 2010.
You just couldn't stay away.
I couldn't stay away. I couldn't rationalize Boston anymore. It's just too cold. Boston's a university town. University towns have a way of making me feel very old because everyone is like perpetually 20, and you're just not getting any. You're getting progressively older with each year. So it's it's no fun.
It's painful.
And it's cold. It's very painful. There's some charm, but most of the time it's quite painful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is 20th. Oh, I think the wrong street. The street may be blocked up.
Okay, I want to take a look at Steve Saylor's blog here. So we got another affirmative action faker exposed. National Lawyers Guild's former first Latina president turns out to be a white woman. So she claimed to be Colombian and Puerto Rican, but has no Colombian or Puerto Rican or Latina identity. So her mom liked sexy Latin lover gentleman. Little Natasha got into salsa dancing and started thinking she was Latino. It's like Alec Baldwin's wife's parents are really into Spain. So Hilaria took flamenco dancing classes in high school and really got into acting Spanish, which may have helped her snag Alec on the rebound after Salma Hayek broke his heart. Alec has probably figured out by now that his wife, the mother of his 5 children, puts on an act when she speaks with a Spanish accent, but he appears to like her act. All right, blowing my way to the top. Man, Kamala Harris should use this title for her autobiography. Then the techno-barbarian warlord dance-off, Raz of Chaz or MAGA Viking, who did the techno-barbarian warlord aesthetic better. Many have theorized that Jason Angeli must be a covert Antifa infiltrator, but he's not ugly enough. If Antifa were full of good-looking people, then they wouldn't be Antifa, would they? And I played you that great moment in Female Physical Equality, where the 2 female cops are absolutely useless. Then don't forget 2020's huge merger surge due to Black Lives Matter, the media egging on black rage. As a result, homicides in America's 104 biggest cities up approximately 38% in 2020. But the media wants to blame this huge increase on the pandemic rather than them pushing the Black Lives Matter lies. But prior to George Floyd's death, crime was dropping in American cities. So prior to George Floyd, May 26, pandemic bright spot in many places, less crime versus December 29. New York Times, violent year in New York and across the U.S. as pandemic fuels crime spike. No, the media pushing Black Lives Matter fueled the crime spike. So a lot of great analysis there. Steve Saylor's blog. And this is a very important point. Alternative timeline for how the New York Times could have covered this story. Mostly peaceful protesters call for electoral accountability inside Capitol. Because this is how they covered it when you had lefties in Madison, Wisconsin. Thousands storm Capitol as GOP takes action. And then they were celebrating the left taking over government buildings. Thousands storm Capitol. So these kind of mob actions in Madison went on for months in 2011. But they were celebrated. Then DC businesses started taking down plywood after 2020 election worries. So if Trump had eked out a win, this is what Washington, D.C. and many of our cities would have looked like. They would have been absolutely devastated. That was the most powerful argument that the Democrats had in 2020. Vote for us, or we're going to burn the country down.
If it's 1% or if it's 50%, it matters.
Yes, I know, but just listen for a minute. 8:70 a.m. here in Los Angeles, which is your station, is reporting that a busload of Antifa arrived and worked their way through the crowds to the very front. These are the professional, looters, rioters, destroyers, disruptive
Right. Okay.
people.
Do we have a picture of the bus?
I'm sorry?
Do we have a picture of that bus?
No, I heard it on the radio.
I have
Would
to
you-
admit, I
would-
thought
okay.
that once the cops showed up, that they backed down. But then we saw it happen. And that's the thing to remember about this. The cops let them in. That's the important thing. This is not a...
No, the cops did not let them in. All right? The mob overwhelmed incompetent cops, but the cops did not let them in. This was not some conspiracy to make MAGA look bad. So stupid analysis there, Matt Chrisman.
This is not a situation where some force just proved too powerful for the state, where the mechanisms of power were somehow overawed by concentrated human effort. No, they let him in. And why they let him in is probably a variety of factors. A lot of it probably just being that because these are people that cops are not trained to dehumanize, they treated them like human beings. And so you can't treat people like human beings if you're going to really dissuade them from doing something they want to do. Like if you really want some people to stop a bunch of very angry people from doing something they want to do, you have to disabuse them of it with violence.
Yeah, and the boomer waffen, as the chat notes, didn't hurt anyone. It was law enforcement that shot and killed that woman.
And you have to be willing to do that. And they weren't willing to do it. That's one explanation. And that's, I think, probably on a micro level part of it. But I think also, there's an idea that the cops are essentially also rioting. They're not happy that Trump lost either. So them letting them in is sort of their way of contributing to the demonstration and signaling their unhappiness.
That's bogus.
And then, of course, you can go full tinfoil hat and say, well, they did it so that this could happen. Because I have to say, if I was the deep state, whatever you want to define that as, if I was like the elements within our government that are seeking to maintain the current system and are most aware of what that entails, as opposed to being ideologically entrapped by their own bullshit like Trump people are, something like this is ideal. You have an incident here that has disciplined both sides perfectly. Because for anyone on the left, the specter of this will be the thing that prevents it from ever being the time to say anything bad about any Democrat in office. Because any show of vulnerability will lead to these people just taking power. And also, it disciplines against even asking for too much, because do you really want them to go wild?
Hey, everyone.
If you did something too big, they would do. Biden is going to get the point to these guys. Anytime there's any big ask for progressive legislation, sure, do you want these guys? Do you really want to test them? And also, I said before that we're going to see a intensification of surveillance and police authority to deal with the continuing immiseration. I mean, crime is going up, as we said, as people said at the beginning of this. Crime was going to go back up, and it's up. It's happening all over the country. Crime's up. It's going to get worse because things keep getting worse, and the dissatisfaction is going to get bigger, and some of it is going to actually be pointed somewhere towards the people responsible for this. And the state's going to be very interested in creating a narrative that allows for the culture at large to go along with massive increases in surveillance and police power. And the specter of a MAGA coup is absolutely just a perfect bloody shirt to wave whenever you want.
Okay, I think this is excellent analysis.
Whenever you're announcing the next round of panopticon surveillance overwhelming everything in the world, what the hell's going on? I'm getting something on this.
Okay, let's go back to Black Pill.
China sent people here, but whatever. We'll continue on. The next move will happen anyway. Basically, once you guys, not really you, but whoever they pick, starts reacting to the Biden win with acts of terrorism, there's going to be a crackdown on quote-unquote white supremacist terrorism. All the think tanks are pushing the threat of white supremacist terror hard.
Well, there is white supremacist terrorism. It's a real thing. People have died. I think it's been exaggerated, the extent of it, but it is a real thing. It's not a completely insignificant threat. It's not something that's completely made up. There are terrorists who are nationalists, who are white nationalists, or there have been terrorists who are Jewish nationalists or black nationalists.
Hard right now in preparation for this. And I think that everyone has seen the FBI and others, like all summer long, while BLM was burning down the country, keep talking about white supremacy for some reason. Like that was the big threat.
It's not just for some reason, right? There have been enough nutty white nationalists doing destructive things that it's not completely absurd that law enforcement would have an interest in them. They're not just making something up out of the air.
After a few huge attacks that will have the nation mourning, yes, even conservatives, you guys are going to be universally despised. Well, I think today it wasn't like a huge attack, but what did we see? The conservatives immediately turning on the protesters. You had...
Yeah, you're always going to have people who are responsible who condemn illegal behavior, like rushing Capitol Hill and occupying Capitol Hill. Any normal, responsible person on the right or the left is going to condemn this kind of behavior.
In fact, you had that ugly Asian guy on Twitter, I always forget his name, say precisely that. He said the white supremacy thing. He said that, oh, all
Andy knows that it wasn't Antifa. So I am skeptical that Antifa played a significant role in the occupation of Capitol Hill yesterday. There may well have been a handful of people, but it was not done the way that Antifa typically operates. There was very little property destruction. There were no fires set.
all these people that are storming the Capitol, those aren't MAGA people. Those are white supremacists. Forget his name. I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
Andy, no.
Ugly Asian guy. Ugly. I think he's gay too. I mean, there's so many.
There were ugly people who stormed the Capitol. There were fine people, I'm sure. There were some decent people. Decent, fine, but idiots, right? To engage in that behavior is idiotic. Okay, so let's go. I'm sure you all want to know, what does the Jewish Telegraphic Agency have to say about the people who stormed the Capitol? Nooses, neo-Nazis, and QAnon, a guide to the symbols on display at the Stop the Count insurrection. Okay, QAnon. So anyone who believes in QAnon is idiotic. The sweatshirt seemed designed to provoke fear. Camp Auschwitz, work brings freedom. The back of the shirt said staff. This is one of many hateful symbols that circulated in the mob, whose violence led to 4 deaths. Okay, that's absurd. One of the deaths was a law enforcement officer who shot an unarmed woman, and the other 3 deaths were medical deaths like a heart attack. Okay, here are QAnon slogans. This is the QAnon flag. I know people who are into QAnon. Oi. Here's a QAnon 1972 jacket. Trust the plan. Save the children. Related to core tenet of QAnon, alleging a global pedophile ring. And then local New England neo-Nazi group in D.C., according to their own accounts.
How you doing, pepper spray, fucking pepper, pussy? Fucking pussy! How you doing, pepper?
Okay, another mob member was spotted wearing a t-shirt that said 6MWE, 6 million weren't enough. All right, so if you're at an event where people are wearing t-shirts that say 6MWE or Camp Auschwitz, probably a good idea to get out of there, and it has nothing to do necessarily with you being morally outraged. It's just that you're going to be around idiots, and idiots do idiotic things, and when there's a response to idiots, the people around idiots often get caught up. So remember the story of Sodom. So Abraham pled with God to spare the people of Sodom as long as he could find at least 10 righteous people. But when there weren't 10 righteous people in Sodom, God destroyed the whole thing with fire. So don't hang around idiots online, offline. Now, carrying a Confederate flag at certain times in history and in certain places, not necessarily a mark of anything antisocial, but to carry a Confederate flag into an occupation of Capitol Hill, January 6, 2021, this is probably someone with antisocial tendencies. Probably not someone that you want to be hanging out with. Probably don't want to hang out with people making nooses and hanging them from trees. Yeah, there have been a lot of hate hoaxes involving nooses, but some of them might be real. One guy walks up to smash news equipment. You're all patriots. I love all of you. We bum rushed it all. It was beautiful. So probably don't hang out with people who smash and destroy other people's property. Anti-government militia symbols, flag reading, when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. Yes, so if the 2020 election was stolen, rebellion becomes duty. I do not believe the election was stolen. I want to make that very clear. Then 333 is the logo of the 3%ers. It's an anti-government militia founded in response to the election of President Obama. According to the ADL, the 3%ers are extremists who are part of the militia movement. Now, the symbol favored by militias is a coiled snake above the phrase, "Don't tread on me." So I'm sure there are a lot of decent, good people who use "Don't tread on me." It's a powerful slogan, and I'm sure there are also a lot of idiots who use the same insignia. The Boogaloo movement, probably a good idea to stay clear of them. These are the Oath Keepers. I don't have any opinion on them. Proud Boys. I don't have any opinion on this overall group. Seems much more pro-social to me than Antifa. So Gavin McGinnis apparently was spotted in the DC crowd yesterday. Crusader crosses. So I don't know what's the significance of that. I mean, I know what it stands for. I don't know the type of people that are attracted to this kind of symbol. And the Punisher, Marvel comic anti-hero, the Punisher has been adopted in recent years by white nationalists. Anti-circumcision activists known as intactivists support banning all forms of circumcision. I don't think there's anything inherently antisocial or worrying or violent or criminal about people who oppose circumcision. Seems like a perfectly reasonable point of view, though of course you can make arguments for something that's reasonable in a ridiculous way like this guy. So the foreskin rights guys have joined the party. And again, I don't think there's anything inherently dangerous about foreskin rights, but some foreskin rights people, I'm sure, are a little whacked. Have you seen a symbol or sign of a hate group we should know about? Please email us.
Okay. I would love to believe it, but I'm guided by truth first. If there's proof, I will certainly announce it. Do I think there were any Antifa people? There probably were. Let me just say this. Had I been there and Antifa started smashing windows, if that's the case, of the U.S. Capitol, I would not have gone in.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Yeah, stay away from people who destroy property.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. I made a mistake, and I needed to correct it immediately. The riots began in May with the George Floyd death.
Hey, everyone.
And
I just want to remind you that we have two webinars coming up very soon.
I remember general silence from Joe Biden on these.
In any case, these the famous pause happens. The
Moldbug.
distribution of mail-in ballots rapidly decreases. Of course, all these affidavits saying, oh yeah, I saw stacks of unfolded mail-in ballots, right? Pre-printed unfold mail-in ballots. This is some of the best affidavits. But something happens, and we know something happens because the odds reverse again. And they reverse again in favor of the eventual winner. And so something surprised this market. There was some information out there that this market does not know. Right? And the fact that now, because these markets, they know what precincts are supposed to report when or what precincts haven't reported. Stupid shit like that does not, stupid like Chiron.
So he's talking about how the betting markets changed from, at one point, saying there was an 85% chance that Donald Trump was going to win to, so this was around, say, 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. on the West Coast. And then by 8 p.m., it appeared obvious that Joe Biden was going to win. So I think he's talking about this shift in the betting markets. So Curtis Yarvin, Moldbug, I've never been a fan, never been passionately opposed either. I've just always had no particular opinion. I've never felt particularly enlightened by him. I don't look up to him. I don't look down on him. He's just never done anything for me in any direction. I've never felt that he was worth my time. The times that I've listened to him, I didn't feel like I was paid off by useful insights. So yeah, I guess with the time I've put into his type of thought, I have not found a payoff. I have not found a use. I just don't think he's worthy of my attention.
On statistics that the media is running on these Chiron statistics mean absolutely jack shit all night. That doesn't mean anything to these prediction markets, right? They were basically looking at the returns and they were like, these are our numbers, our kind of demographic numbers for where Trump needs to be to win this. These numbers are clearly coming through, and then they weren't coming through, right? And the that surprise is interesting. That surprise is, of course, a red flag. Red flag doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? And then you're like, the way I run through it in my latest posts is I'm like, okay, let's suppose you're investigating
Okay, so I want to be clear. Also, YouTube terms of service. I think this is bogus. What he's saying.
A potential crime, or you're an investigator. You're looking for things to investigate. The first thing you need to investigate.
He doesn't have a clue what he's talking about, yet he feels completely free to share with the world his completely fact-free, unsubstantiated delusions about the 2020 vote.
Is some kind of supposition that something happened here. Like, was there an event? You don't go on fishing expeditions. You don't investigate non-crimes.
Right.
Okay, so you're basically, you look at this and you're like, has something funny happened here that has never happened before in my experience? Yes. I've watched a number of, I'm a grown man. I've watched.
Oh, he's watched elections on the basis of watching elections. We were told prior to the election, if you're reading Axios, they said initially it's going to appear like a wave is rolling in. Why? Because Republican legislatures in many of the swing states decreed that you cannot count mail-in ballots until the day of the election. So the first ballots to be counted will be those who cast their vote on the day of the election. So initially it's going to appear that there's a red wave. That's exactly what happened. Then when the mail-in ballots started to be counted, it became obvious that Joe Biden was going to be the president of the United States.
Number of elections, and I've never seen anything like this.
Me too.
Right. So that's interesting. Of course, it's.
Oh my God, it's interesting. He's watched previous elections, and now he's watched this election, and he hasn't seen anything like this election. So based on his watching of election news coverage, he's got these insights.
Very funny year. Everything's different. You never know what's happening. But the thing is that when you look at things, you see a bunch of flags like this. So, you have sort of two questions. There's actually two basically paths of, ways of being fraud pilled. You can be on election machines, you can be a Dominion fraud pilled guy, or you can be a mail-in ballots fraud pilled guy. I'm mostly a mail-in ballots fraud pilled guy.
Yeah, and you don't know anything, right? You need a little expertise. You need to do a little research. You can't just watch TV and come up with these theories and think, oh, this election's different because the news coverage on previous TV news election was different than the news coverage that this Gestalt experience of watching the election news was different. It was unprecedented, and therefore I buy into the following conspiracy theories for which I have no evidence that they were substantial enough to swing the election. But because my Gestalt experience of watching TV news was different this time compared to last time, and because we have COVID, therefore I've got these theories. Okay, pretty weak stuff.
Pretty fucking fags in this movement. It's ridiculous. Anyway.
This is black-pilled.
Basically, China and Biden are in this together. Once everybody knows if they have any white supremacists among their friends or family, that is when gun control will speed through.
Okay, this notion that Biden and China are in it together, that they're just like this, that Biden is simply executing China's grand plan to take over the world. It's weak. Like, if you were the president of the United States, your country is on a trajectory to become increasingly powerful in the years and decades ahead compared to all your competitors. But yeah, you're just going to throw over the sovereignty of your country because China will give your family $30 million. Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. My God, there's so much nonsense out there.
And here's why. Because basically when you're looking to investigate a crime, you basically, in like detective Hercule Poirot land, I believe Agatha Christie came up with this one. There's the three-legged stool of crime. There's motive, propensity, and opportunity.
Right.
You're an idiot. That means nothing. That's what you get from reading detective fiction. That's not the real world. Prosecutors don't work on that basis. People repeat this endlessly, that if you got motive and opportunity, that this is meaningful. It's not meaningful. This is not how you detect crimes. This is not how you detect frauds. This is a trope in TV and films. It does not correspond to how the criminal justice system works. Let me play this again.
Potential crime. or you're an investigator. You're looking for things to investigate.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you need to investigate is some kind of supposition that something happened here. Like, was there an event? You don't go on fishing expeditions. You don't investigate non-crimes.
Right.
Okay, so you're basically, you look at this and you're like, has something funny happened here that has never happened before in my experience? Yeah.
You don't go investigating crimes because you feel like something funny happened that hasn't happened before in my experience. Right? That's not how criminal investigations operate. This is complete delusion. This is a guy who watches TV, who's seen some films and read some detective fiction and thinks he understands the 2020 election. And he doesn't feel like he needs to do any research to try to find some substantiation for his point of view. He's watched TV, and he's read detective fiction, or he's heard of detective fiction, and therefore...
Yes, I've watched a number of... I'm a grown man. I've watched a number of elections, you know.
He's watched a number of elections, and he's a grown man. And this is the basis for his analysis. He's watched some elections. He's heard of detective fiction, or even possibly read some detective fiction.
And I've never seen anything like this.
Me too.
Right? So that's interesting. Of course, you know, it's a very funny year. Everything's different. You never know what's happening. But the thing is that when you look at things, you see a bunch of flags like this. So, you know, you have sort of two questions. There's actually two basically paths of, ways of being fraud pilled. You can be on election machines, you can be a Dominion fraud pilled guy, or you can be a mail-in ballots fraud pilled guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly a mail-in ballots fraud pilled guy, and here's why. Because basically when you're looking to investigate...
Yeah, I was wondering, is Curtis Yarvin and Thaddeus Russell, I was really curious, are they Dominion fraud guys? Or are they mail-in ballot guys? Because I was just so desperate to know their perspective, because they have such a renowned track record in election fraud analysis. Right? You've seen their highly respected papers that they've published on election fraud. They are renowned all around the world for their election fraud analysis. And so I was just wondering, are they going to be Dominion guys? They're going to be mail-in ballots guys. Okay, so we got two guys here who know nothing about the mechanics of voter fraud, stroking each other off because they've seen TV coverage of different elections.
A crime. You basically, in like detective Hercule Poirot land, I believe Agatha Christie came up.
Okay, so this is really the intellectual basis of his analysis. Not any familiarity with voter fraud, no familiarity with literature about voter fraud, but he's heard that Agatha Christie had a particular analysis. This reminds me of Asia Carrera, the retired Asian porn star. She would talk to me about how ridiculous Christianity was. And I'd say, oh, and what's the basis for your thinking? And she talked about, oh, what was that novel that got made into a Tom Hanks film about how Christianity was a fraud. It was very not Catch Me If You Can, but the Da Vinci Code. Okay, Asia Carrera's analysis of Christianity was based on the Da Vinci Code, a sloppy, mediocre, low IQ pulp novel. And that's the whole basis of her analysis, is the Da Vinci Code. So Curtis Yarvin, Moldbug, he bases his electoral fraud analysis on the equivalent of the Da Vinci Code. Can you imagine someone who so completely lacking in intellectual integrity that they base their analysis of Christianity on the slop of the Da Vinci Code, that lowbrow, low-rent novel? Right, that's the basis of their perspective on God and religion and Christianity. Okay, can you imagine how much contempt you'd have for such a person? Okay, you can now apply that same level of contempt for the analysis of Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin, and Thaddeus Russell.
With this one, there's the three-legged stool of crime. There's
Okay, the three-legged stool of crime. This is not used in the criminal justice system. This only is used in detective novels.
Motive, propensity, and opportunity.
Motive, propensity, and opportunity proves nothing, establishes nothing. It's not a basis for the criminal justice system. It's not a basis for criminal prosecution. It's not a basis for police investigation. It's something that exists in detective novels. This guy is absolutely the intellectual equivalent of Asia Carrera, porn star, who derides Christianity because of what she learned from reading the low-rent, low-brow Da Vinci Code. My God. And people lap this up. Why do people lap this up? Because this completely lacks intellectual integrity. It completely lacks rationality, completely lacks any empirical basis. It has nothing going for it, right? This is just slop. This is garbage. This is trash. Why do people lap up this trash, this garbage, this dog's vomit and say it's delicious? Because it tells them what they want to hear. So if you're choosing your live streams and your podcasts on the basis of them telling you what you want to hear, you're going through life with a whole series of delusions continually reinforced. There's absolutely no merit to this analysis. It's just nonsense. It's trash. And people, this video has been watched 16,511 views. There's an enormous appetite out there for trash. I mean, think about the enormous views that Academic Agent gets, these other grifters and shysters just peddling falsehoods and delusions and lies that might bring in money for them, might bring in a feeling of fame and influence and power for them, but what they're giving to you is toxic. What they're giving to you are delusions. What they're giving to you are lies. But people lap up this dog's vomit because it tells them what they want to hear.
Right.
Right. So basically,
motive is off the charts.
Motive is off the charts actually for two reasons. Number one, do they want to win this election? Yes. But the more interesting question in motive is, do they want to win this election by any means necessary? And when you look at the mindset of the lib, okay, let's investigate.
Okay, so this was the basis of Dennis Prager's analysis. Why was Dennis Prager so sure that there was massive voter fraud in the 2020 election? Because liberals had the mindset of by any means necessary. Well, there are plenty of people on both sides who have the mindset of by any means necessary. That's not really a convincing basis for believing in massive voter fraud, because the other side is so wicked that they completely lack moral scruples. Well, if you want to push this argument that there was massive voter fraud, then you are releasing everyone who buys into your lie. You're releasing them from any moral scruples. You are becoming the mirror image of what you contend the left is like. You contend the left lacks any moral scruples? Well, by pushing this lie of voter fraud costing Donald Trump 2020 election, you are releasing those idiots who tune in to your inside and analysis from having any moral scruples. Because if the 2020 election was decided by voter fraud, there are no moral scruples. There are no boundaries. Nothing is forbidden. You can do absolutely anything if there was voter fraud that decided the 2020 election.
We got to know our enemy here.
Yeah.
Let's investigate the lib. Does the lib think that it would be the right thing to do to basically engage in, a little paper shenanigans to save the world from Orange Hitler?
Yes, indeed they do.
Yes,
because that's
indeed
what they
do.
did.
Because
that's what they did for 3 years before the election.
And yes, that's what they did for 3 years before the election.
Yes.
Of course, the lib is hypocritical. We've discussed this. And the lib is also a great believer in what philosophers know as consequential ethics, which means basically the means justify the ends, right? And
Ooh, nice.
Guess what? The means do justify the ends. If you don't believe the means justify the ends, you're an imbecile. You're an idiot. You completely lack any wisdom. You're so stupid. You don't believe that the means justify the ends. Sometimes the means justify the ends. Sometimes they don't. Let's say somebody has a nuclear weapon in Los Angeles, and they ask you for, say, some necessary code to make this nuclear bomb go off, and you mislead them about the nuclear code. So their attempt to unleash a nuclear bomb in Los Angeles that would, let's say, kill 5 million people is stopped and defused because you tell them a lie, right? It's commonly accepted moral wisdom that it is wrong to tell lies, right? The means of stopping this nuclear explosion that would kill 5 million people is that you have to tell a lie. What kind of person would say, oh no, it's wrong to tell a lie in that instance? Absolutely, the means justify the ends. How morally imbecilic, how stupid, how completely removed from reality, how delusional do you have to be to claim that the means never justify the ends? Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin, completely removed from morality. He thinks this is a strong argument that many liberals believe that the means justify the ends, or the ends justify the means. They do sometimes, and sometimes they don't. If you don't see that sometimes it's necessary to tell a lie to save millions of lives, or to tell a lie to save one life, if you don't see the moral good in that, there's no hope for you. You're completely removed from reality. And tens of thousands of people think this is trenchant analysis. And look at their smiling faces. Right? These guys are stroking themselves off that Curtis Yarvin has made this amazing point that there are many liberals who believe that sometimes the ends justify the means. But if you don't think sometimes that the ends justify the means, you have no attachment to reality, you have no attachment to decency, you have no ability to think. You're just an imbecile, you're an idiot. My God, and people lap up this nonsense. Look at these self-satisfied grins. They think they've nailed liberals because there are liberals who believe that sometimes the ends justify the means. They think, oh, we've established voter fraud in 2020. We've established the Achilles heel of liberals because we came up with this line, oh, liberals believe that the ends justify the means. And look at those self-satisfied grins. They think they've established a great moral, political, philosophical point. And all their retailing is garbage.
Nice. And so exactly. Whereas
look how self-satisfied they are for retailing a stupid, moronic, imbecilic point. But they're incredibly satisfied with themselves.
Poor Khan is wedded to his world of deontological ethics.
Yeah. The conservative, we all know conservatives, right? Just wedded to the world of ontological efforts. Like every conservative I know is just wedded to the world of ontological ethics. So a conservative, if he was given a choice to tell a lie and save 5 million innocent lives, or to tell the truth and enable the murder of 5 million lives, according to this brilliant analysis by Curtis Yarvin, like the Khan, because of his ontological ethics, right? He cannot tell a lie. So better 5 million people go up in smoke than to tell a lie because of his ontological ethics. We all know that conservatives, they just spend all their spare time immersed in ontological ethics. He's completely removed from morality. There's no evidence that people on the left consistently, empirically, demonstrably are less law-abiding than people on the right. Some people on the left are less law-abiding than some people on the right. Overall, there's no verifiable, empirical, statistical, demonstrable, consistent, verifiable, replicable finding that people on the left are consistently less ethical than people on the right. But people who are conservatives, they got that ontological ethics. And he used the word ontological and he combined it with ethics, that they're just so self-satisfied. They've made another brilliant point that people, because of ontological ethics on the right, that they're just not going to be willing to cheat as much as liberals. And people lap this up because it tells them what they want to hear. And it's sheer nonsense. You will be more stupid. You'll be less moral. You'll have less clarity. You'll have less awareness of how the world works. You'll be further removed from reality listening to Curtis Yarvin.
And he will stay at his duty until the volcanic eruption leaves.
Yeah. Conservatives, we know they will all just stay and do their duty, right? because they've got ontological ethics, right? You just can't imagine that a conservative would ever, not stay and do their duty. Nothing like having a sturdy pair of ontological ethics.
Some frozen at his post, basically,
Wow.
and that's how he dies, right?
Wow.
He's
and so
far too honorable.
And so he's far too honorable, and so the motive is pretty solid here. Then we look at propensity. Are there maybe like big city political machines in the Democratic Party? Do they have political organizers? Do they have they stolen elections in the lives of those now living that are now known because they were known only after the fact?
Right.
I'm hearing yes, yes, and yes, right? If you want to convince me that this is a...
Okay, notice the basis for his thought. I'm hearing, and I've watched elections. I mean, this is the basis of his analysis. I'm hearing. You can hear anything. That's a really lousy basis for making an argument. And remember, let's remember the consequences. If the 2020 elections were stolen, there are no longer any moral barriers. You can do absolutely anything in response to that. To steal such a consequential presidential election, then all bets are off. So this is what he's pushing. He's pushing an opinion which will release those who believe it, and hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans want to believe this. So he is delivering a pill that will remove all moral scruples from those who swallow this pill. What's the basis? Part of the basis is I'm hearing. How can you not have contempt for these guys? How can you not have contempt for their sloppy thinking? I'm hearing. That's the basis. That's a basis for his thinking here. I'm hearing.
A wolf that has somehow reformed itself. Tell me how, why, and when, and who reformed it. I don't see any reform at all. I see that actually there used to be people who were putting leashes on the wolves, and now there aren't.
There was a judge in Pennsylvania, I think near Philadelphia, who was convicted earlier this year, before the election, of election fraud, and he was in charge of the election.
Well, I mean, naturally, if you're going to employ the fox in the henhouse,
my God,
you might as well hire him as the chief rooster, right?
Yeah.
And he'll certainly do an excellent job of keeping all other foxes out of your henhouse. And
right.
So we see propensity, then we see opportunity. Okay, is there anything in the United States that involves counting people that works? I mean, like that. Don't forget, this is the country where you establish.
Okay, is there anything in the United States that involves counting people that works? I would say so. You can look at American educational attainment when you divide it by race. American public education produces overall higher test scores when you divide it by race than pretty much any other public school system in the world. America is the dominant country in the world. It's the dominant economy in the world. America spends more on its military than all other nations put together. Americans, generally speaking, are afforded a higher standard of living than people in almost any other first world nation. So
establish your identity to the DMV with a utility bill, right? This is this is a country which has actively worked in every possible way, not only not to have no voter security, but also to have no citizenship security.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So a country that has devoted itself in every possible way to have no voter security and no citizenship security. All right. This is his argument. All right. So we have people who study this topic full time for the Heritage Foundation, and in their exhaustive survey of elections since 1980, so we're talking here about over 1 billion votes cast. We're talking billions of votes cast. How many documentable cases of voter fraud have they found? About 1,100. 1,100. All right, that's like 0.001 of votes cast. We have documentable evidence of voter fraud.
Wow.
So like, I mean, the idea of, I'm going to send out these absentee ballots that are, I mean, is there any process in America that you know of that like successfully checks signatures?
Okay, we've had 5 states that exclusively do mail-in ballots. Now, do they have astronomical rates of voter fraud? No, we have no evidence that there is higher rates of voter fraud for these 5 states that exclusively do mail-in ballots. So he feels completely comfortable opining on all sorts of topics that he knows absolutely nothing about. Like, how would you not feel empty inside? How would you not know that you're a fraud, that you're enabling a mindset that releases people from any and all moral considerations on the basis of, I heard about this Agatha Christie approach. I've watched various elections on TV.
I mean, the whole thing is just like, it's this sort of it's this kind of scientific pretense where you're just like, actually, once you mail out 100 million absentee ballots, half of which get thrown in the recycling God knows where, and you accept any scrawl that comes in as a signature because my signature is a fucking scrawl, and like, how would you actually, how would you actually filter signatures and tens of millions of absentee ballots? It's ridiculous. It could never even happen.
How would you do it? I would think, this is just me, before I go on a stream and use this as my foundational argument for a point that would release anyone who buys my point from any moral scruples, I would think it'd be incumbent upon me to try to understand, how do they use signature verification? What is the process? How effective is it? I think you'd want to investigate that, but Curtis Yarvin feels zero responsibility to have any knowledge about what he's talking about, even though he is pushing a poison that will release anyone who buys this from any moral scruples.
Right? There's just this pretense that this mechanism exists. And so you've already decided.
It's just a pretense. So have you even looked into it? How does it work? Have you done any investigation prior to proclamation? This reminds me, I've talked to university professors who feel completely free to give devastating debunkings of books that they have not read. I had an online friend come on this show and denounce Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. And he just went up and down about how stupid and fraudulent this book was. So I pressed him, could you give me some examples? And he says, well, this book doesn't mention World War II or World War I. I thought, that's hard to believe. So I do a quick look while he's talking on about how fraudulent this book is. It turns out the book over and over and over and over again mentions World War I, World War II, and the massive numbers of deaths that resulted from those conflicts. So I brought him up to my online friend. I said, hey, you're making all these arguments that Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, is bogus because it doesn't mention World War I, World War II, or Soviet genocides. But these things are documented and mentioned throughout the book. He just went on. Like, he said things that were just completely fraudulent. There was no factual basis. And I understand that. Like, we've all done it. As a live streamer, you say things that you regret. But when this is brought to his attention, he feels zero guilt. He feels no embarrassment that he was completely wrong, that he said things that were totally without substance, that the whole basis of his critique, in which he lorded over in a pompous, self-righteous manner, was fraudulent. And he felt no shame for knowing nothing about what he was talking about. No shame for coming on my show and retailing lies. No shame, no embarrassment. Was he a little bit, taken aback? Not a whit. He could not care less that his main arguments were completely fraudulent. There are just people who are just breathtakingly irresponsible. And other academics I've talked to will just condemn whole books they've never read, right? but they have these devastating critiques of books they've never read, and to them, there's no challenge with their integrity, right? Hey, I'm an academic. I can condemn these books I've never read. I can tell you why these books are false, even though I've never read them. I can tell you why these books are stupid, even though I've never read them. I can tell you why these books are pushing lies, even though I've never read them. And when you ask them, hey, have you read them? No, I don't feel a need to. And they're not ashamed. Like, I would feel shame. I would feel embarrassment. Like people laponi us all the time, corrects me. And I realize, oh, that was a great point. I didn't realize that. I was wrong there. Like, I'm wrong all the time. And when I am, I try to correct. I feel shame if the basis of a very powerful argument that I have made turns out to be completely false. I feel terrible. I feel embarrassed. I feel shame. But so many people I know, they feel no shame about retailing things that are completely false. They feel no shame about stating all sorts of things that they know absolutely nothing about. You should feel ashamed if you're talking about books and condemning books you haven't read. You should feel ashamed if you're making arguments that turn out to be fact-free. You should feel ashamed if you go on somebody's show and say all sorts of things for which there is no substance. In fact, the evidence points in the opposite direction. Like, what kind of person feels no shame? Someone who's deeply messed up. What happens to deeply messed up people? They become a cropper. They are humiliated. Their ties fray. People turn their backs on them. They may be up, but you live a life of deceit. You have no shame about lying and deceiving and conniving and retailing fraud. You have no shame or embarrassment about that. You will come a very nasty a cropper. You will be brought low. You will be humbled. You will be smashed. Life will do you like a dinner. Life will run over you like a Mack truck. And that inevitably happens. Like, I've been blogging since 1997. I've had all sorts of, online flame wars. And I've often been wrong. I've often said the wrong thing. I've gotten my facts wrong. I've made embarrassing errors, right? Frequently, my critics have been more right than I am. So this is not me telling you that I'm always right. But I have seen a substantial number of people who I've been in flame wars, substantial number of people dying of alcoholism, dying early in their 40s and 50s, dying miserably, dying alone, unable to pay their bills, spiraling down and down and down. And it was obvious from years before because these people had no compunction about lying. They had no compunction about publicly stating things that they knew nothing about. They had no compunction about condemning things where they had no expertise. They had no compunction about making things up, pushing fraud, using dishonest argumentation. They weren't even ashamed or embarrassed when it was brought to their attention. What was the result? Bam, bam. Life just ran over them like a Mack truck. The problem, as my father pointed out, is not that life is not fair. The problem is that life is not perfectly fair. Okay, the repercussions for living a life of fraud and deceit don't hit you right away. But the mills of the gods grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Okay, what Curtis Yarvin is doing, he is going to be run over metaphorically by a Mack truck. This kind of irresponsibility, this kind of utter disregard for truth, this irresponsible airing of opinions for which there is no factual basis. Okay, people like this come a cropper. You cannot live a happy, effective life where deceit is the essence of your method. If lying, deceiving, being filled with grandiosity where you have no basis to feel grand is the essence of how you operate, life is going to run you over. You will be brought low. If you can't accept reality, then you must be brought to your knees and given no choice.
That, this is this, the analogy that I used actually You know, first of all, the thing that I say in my second election post is that you know, if the election was stolen, it was stolen fair and square. You know, and the analogy that I use for an American election, which is sort of intentionally left unsecured like this, is an analogy. I don't know this firsthand, so maybe I'm embroidering the analogy, but it's the analogy of water polo. So
Okay, he doesn't know, but he's going to tell us anyway.
I don't know how much you know about water polo, but it's a sport. They throw balls into nets in the water.
Yeah,
you know,
I know that. Yeah.
Right. But the thing about water polo, of course, it's a sport. It's not war. There's a referee.
Yeah.
But the thing is, here's the thing about water polo: the referee is above the water.
Ah.
They don't have like underwater video assistant referees or anything.
Right. So that's
the
where all the
referee
cheating,
is above
all the
the
cheating
water.
goes on underneath.
Right.
The water.
So basically, anything that you do under the water,
yeah,
is fair game. So these guys are twisting each other's balls all afternoon.
That's right.
Right. You know, and so the thing is that if you're playing a game of water polo and you choose to regard your game of water polo as a game of rules water polo above the water, you're gonna lose.
Yep.
You have to be down there twisting balls, or you have to basically get a referee under the water. And so the thing is,
how do you get this kind of arrogant state? Like, how do you get to this contemptuous state, right? By deep weaknesses in your fundamental character. Ugh. Sickening that people look up to this.
I'm sure he issued statements that is correct. In that regard, that is correct. And within a week of the riots beginning, which is still not presidential. But the silence of the left with regard to the riots, the acceptance of the rioters by Democratic governors, how many were prosecuted in any city? When Portland was taken over, a section of Portland, a section of Seattle.
Notice it was very important to Dennis Prager to note when he got something factually incorrect. He wanted to correct himself. So, a very, very decent man.
By Marxist groups taking over a police station. What was that, in Seattle? Where were the Democratic governors and mayors? It strains credulity. In other words, it's dishonest to deny that there was tacit support for the riots, let alone few condemnations. So I acknowledge the Joe Biden statements.
Of course. Devin Stack.
You're a fucking traitor to your country! Yeah. You're a fucking traitor! Fucking
So there's nothing wrong with digging the energy here, but you can dig the energy and also realize that this behavior is knuckle-headed, that it will have very negative repercussions on not just all the people who participated, but also for people in general on the right. People in general on the right will have fewer freedoms. They'll have more speech restriction and other negative repercussions as a result of this knuckle-headed behavior. So yeah, you can absolutely dig the energy. Nothing wrong with digging the energy and emotionally relating to what they're doing. And at the same time, rationally and morally recognize that this was a very bad idea.
Yep. On it.
Let's go. Hey, let's go.
What strain is that? What strain of weed is that?
I'm listening to the music of a military band. Listening to a Yankee Doodle simply sets me off my noodle. It's that patriotic something that no one can understand. Way down south in the land of Columbia, Georgia's hiring, and that inspiring. Hooray, hooray, we'll join the Jubilee. Let's go and song for the Yankees I go. Red, white, and blue, I am for you. Now let's go to grand old flag. Go to grand old flag. Go to high flying flag. And forever in peace and grace. For the emblem of America love. The hope of the free and the brave. Every heart beats under red, white, and blue. Where there's never a rose or rag. But you know that way from Steve Burger. Keep your eye on the grand old flag. Over there, say a word over there. And the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drum coming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over there. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over
Senator Hawley, do you still plan to object to Pennsylvania tonight, Senator Hawley?
Okay, Donald Trump has conceded.
I'd like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. We have just been through an intense election and emotions are high, but now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation. 2020 has been a challenging time for our people. A menacing pandemic has upended the lives of our citizens, isolated millions in their homes, damaged our economy, and claimed countless lives. Defeating this pandemic and rebuilding the greatest economy on earth will require all of us working together. It will require a renewed emphasis on the civic values of patriotism, faith, charity, community, and family. We must revitalize the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as one national family. To the citizens of our country, serving as your president has been the honor of my lifetime. And to all of my wonderful supporters, I know you are disappointed, but I also want you to know that our incredible journey is only just beginning. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Okay, so where are people like Academic Agent Now who predicted that Trump would still be in power January 21? I think Kevin Michael Grace predicted that Trump would still be in power January 21, 2021. Where are all these people who've predicted this absolute nonsense, completely divorced from reality, that Trump was going to stay in office after noon Eastern Time, January 20th, 2021? and all the people that you've chosen to watch and to support who are feeding your delusions, who are telling you what you wanted to hear, when what you wanted to hear were essentially lies, delusions, fantasies about reality that were completely disconnected from reality itself. I mean, do you really want to go on just hearing pretty little lies? Do you really want to go on just like, oh, let me find the person who'll tell me what I want to hear, who will feed my delusions about reality? Let me find those people who will fire up my sense of resentment and my sense of being screwed over. Let me distract myself from the absolute wreckage that is my life. Let me distract myself from my drug addiction. Let me distract myself from my porn addiction. Let me distract myself from my alcoholism. Let me distract myself from my under-earning. Let me distract myself from my debting. Let me distract myself from my inability to develop and maintain friendships. Let me distract myself from my countless failures in life and give me reasons and excuses why all my problems are the fault of some shadowy elite who hate me and want me dead. Let me focus on anything but the absolute wreckage of my own life. Give me the opportunity to feel that there's some, amazing movement out there that I can get totally obsessed with, like QAnon. And that way I can distract myself from my own failures. Let me find anything else to focus on rather than the gaping wounds in my own life and my own psyche. Let me focus on anything but my own failures. Let me focus on anything other than the pathetic nature of what's really going on in my life. So let me find someone who will tell me what I want to hear, tell me lies and delusions, and perhaps if they'll do it with a British accent, that way it will sound much more authentic. Right? Which grifter, which shyster, which deceit merchant are you going to seek out now that you know how they've been deceiving themselves and deceiving you over the past few months, peddling lie after lie, completely disconnected from reality? Do you really want to go on living in delusion, finding people who will feed you a fantasy world so that you can try not to feel the pain and the misery of what you experience in real life because your own approach to life is not working? But hey, let me just distract myself from my own failures. Let me distract myself from the gaping wounds in my own life. Let me distract myself from my inability to earn a decent living. Let me distract myself from my inability to live without drugs or alcohol. And what can I blame my problems on? Oh, how about the UN? So comment in the chat. UN wants to do door-to-door in the name of COVID all over the world, Chinese communist style. Yeah, let me distract myself with the UN is taking over. The UN and the Chinese communists, the Chi-Coms, they want to take over and destroy us. My problems are the fault of the UN, the Chinese Communist Party, and the elites. Pure delusion. The UN has no power. The UN is not ruining your life. The elites are not ruining your life. America, for all its flaws, is still the most effective and powerful nation on earth. Not only that, as each year goes by, not only will we not descend into civil war, the United States, compared to its competitors, will grow increasingly powerful. So do you want to live in reality, or do you want to keep living in delusion that the 2020 vote was stolen and that you should trust the plan and QAnon? Jesus Christ.
Is that what's interesting is that this reality makes the election actually sort of more real than it pretends to be, because it's not just a contest of counting heads. It's it's also a contest of twisting balls. And the thing is, the whole premise of a democratic election is whoever can muster the most heads is going to be the one who's going to win in a civil war, so we should just let them rule instead of having the civil war.
Right.
Very sensible kind of game theory perspective.
Okay.
But the more sort of realistic, if instead of just counting heads, you're actually counting the ability to be effective in this kind of ball twisting election fight, then you're basically like, yeah, actually the strong have earned the mandate of heaven here.
Okay.
And what this election has shown is that Donald John Trump should not be president for another 4 years, because he easily could have ripped these guys' balls off, and he failed to do so. And you, his bosses, the American people, should hold him responsible for that. You should hold him responsible for failing to drain the deep state. You shouldn't be like, you know, the thing is that I hate to say it, you know, now as we're coming to the end of Trump's term, I'm more comfortable criticizing him. And, you know, what I would say to the American.
Oh, wow, he's more comfortable. Why is he more comfortable? Because he didn't want to discomfort his supporters. He didn't want to discomfort those who are giving him applause. He didn't want to stand up to them. He didn't want to inconvenience his relationship with his adoring followers. So to avoid that kind of inconvenience, to avoid the awkward feelings that might result if he said what he truly believed, so he's been lying to you to try to keep your support, to keep your adoration. And a lot of people will lie to you to try to keep your support and to keep your adoration. He's been pulling his punches apparently for years because he didn't want to lose your love. He's been cucking to your prejudices. So he knows that you want lies. He's been delivering lies, but now that the certain lies will no longer stand up, so now years later he's going to tell you what he really thinks. Now he could have been honest all along, but if he was honest, that might have cost him some adoration, might have cost him some followers, right? Might have been a little bit awkward. So instead he chose to live in deceit.
American people, it's a very kind of it's really I'm not a pickup artist, I'm a happily married man, but it's really a pickup artist message, is that, you know, like, you've had this wild fling with Trump. Okay, you're like this homely girl who has never been kissed, and you had this incredible 4-year affair. Or like you're this like ugly virgin dude who's never gotten laid.
Exactly.
Now you know what real politics is like. Now you know what it feels like to fuck. Okay, but you know, you can bleep that if you want. But
never.
Just a prank, bro. Just a prank. Just a prank.
Now you feel what it knows like to fuck. But you know what? Basically, to say that you're a player would be going too far. And
you could
you've taken
your
the
anxiety.
first step.
What would you say it was like right now on a 1 through 10 scale?
Probably like a 6 or 7. Pretty high.
And where do you feel the anxiety?
In my stomach and my chest, kind of can feel my heartbeat, and kind of in my head. It just feels like a real kind of a sense of awareness.
And when did this anxiety start? When were you first aware of it?
In life or tonight?
In life.
Sorry. Childhood. I mean, I don't know how to go in there without telling everything, but
go ahead.
My mom was, you know, as an alcoholic.
So this is licensed clinical social worker LCSW Alan Gordon.
Alcoholic and been married about 5 or 6 times, and you know, don't know my biological father, and then obviously having several come in and out, and it just was always stress. I mean, every day my mom was off the ringer. I mean, every single day was a disaster, and something was happening, and it was money, and it was this, and we weren't behaving well. And
hold on a second. What's happening to your anxiety as you're talking right now?
It's getting worse.
Is it okay? I want you. So one of the things I notice is, as you're talking, you have a tendency to really emphasize what you're saying, and what I hear in your voice is your voice seems to be speeding up a little bit. There seems to be
Okay, so there's work that you can do to grapple with and to move on from and to overcome your anxiety. You don't have to keep choosing to live in a world of lies, deceit, and delusion, believing in things completely divorced from reality. There's real, honest inner work that you can do, which is hard, which is challenging, which is wrenching, but can completely change your life. So there are many lies going along about the 2020 election. One of the more common ones is that Joe Biden only improved Democratic margins in 4 major swing states, and it's nonsense. But this viral claim, this lie, was retailed by Patrick Basham at Democracy Institute, by Matt Vesper at Town Hall, by Mike LaChance at Gateway Pundit, by Rasmussen Reports, and they're all quoting Richard Barris, the pollster. How curious that, as Richard Barris notes, Trump won the largest non-white vote share for a Republican presidential candidate in 60 years. Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton in every major metro area around the country, save for Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. Okay, that's pollster Richard Barris. Completely bogus. Just flat out wrong. Robert Barnes, foremost election analyst, observes these big cities and swing states run by Democrats, the vote even exceeded the number of registered voters. False. Trump's victories in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin were on target until, in the middle of the night, counting was arbitrarily halted. Miraculously, several 100,000 votes off of Biden were mysteriously found. Trump's real lead subsequently vanished. This was predicted. Anyone who read Axios prior to the election, there's going to be a red mirage because in certain swing states, Republican legislatures forbade the counting of mail-in ballots until Election Day, so the Trump vote got counted first. That's what happened. And National Review, I'm reading here from National Review, November 16, 2020. This was obvious that these were lies retailed by Patrick Basham, Matt Vesper, Mike LaChance, Rasmussen Reports, Robert Barnes, Richard Barris. They've been lying to you. Okay, they've been pushing nonsense. Do you really want to live in this world of lies, fraud, and deceit? Right? Trump did not just do well in 4 particular cities. There was nothing unusual or out of proportion to how Joe Biden did in these 4 cities. He did worse some places like Philadelphia than Hillary Clinton. So if you look at the facts, look at the 36 largest U.S. cities outside of California and New York, where Biden beat Trump by at least 10,000 votes. Biden consistently outperformed what Hillary Clinton did in 2016. So no, Joe Biden did not underperform Hillary Clinton in 32 of the 36 major American cities. It's just emphatically false. It's a lie that's being retailed to you, and people want to believe it. Various reasons. People would rather live in a world of deceit than in reality.
A focus on what you're saying or conveying what you're saying across. And I'm wondering if, as you're talking and as you're explaining what's going on, if you're aware, if you're attending to the anxiety that you're feeling.
No, I think I know that I definitely talk faster and faster, and if I'm nervous, whether it's something at work or I'm in sales and it's getting closer to a sale or train people, I talk faster and faster.
Okay, hold on, stop again. I want you to check in. I want you to see if you can just really attend to this physical sensation of anxiety that you feel. And I want you to think of it like a baby in the other room, that if there's a baby that's crying, you don't just neglect the baby. You don't just let it cry. What you do is you go over, you attend to the baby, and you soothe it and help bring it down a little bit. And I want you to look at your...
And good question in the chat. So Joe Biden, a serial unpopular loser with a mental disability, got higher numbers than Obama and Hillary. Yes, because Biden wasn't just running on his own. Okay, it wasn't just a test of how much do you love Joe Biden. The alternative was Joe Biden or Donald Trump. We saw it in the 2018 midterm elections. Massive voter turnout, massive Democratic voter turnout in particular, because guess what? A lot of the country really hates Donald Trump. Donald Trump never moved beyond his base. He consistently ran for all 4 years with approval ratings around 42%. You don't win a re-election with approval ratings around 42%. So was Joe Biden 2 points more popular than Hillary Clinton? Yeah. Joe Biden had run in 2016, he would have won in 2016. That's all you need. Biden did better than Hillary in the suburbs. He was always a little bit more popular than Hillary Clinton. That's all. He doesn't need to be loved, doesn't need to be admired, doesn't need strong support. He simply needs people to vote for him over Donald Trump. That's all it was. Trump never expanded his base. Trump was never a popular president. So Joe Biden proved to be just a little bit more palatable to the majority of voting Americans than Donald Trump. That's it. They don't need to love him, like him, respect him, admire him, or have strong support for Biden.
Your anxiety right now the same way, because what I hear is as you're talking, there's a rise in anxiety, but that your internal state is being ignored, it's being neglected, and there seems to be a prioritizing of the words you're saying or getting across what you're trying to articulate or even having me understand it. But it seems like the actual internal feeling or sensation or anxiety is getting ignored when that happens. So I want you just to take about 30 seconds or so right now and really see if you could sit with and...
Okay, good question in the chat. Do I think that Trump is a narcissist or a sociopath like leftists contend? I have no idea his psychiatric diagnosis. I think he was not particularly adept at governing. He does not have a track record showing he's particularly adept at running things. I believe he's still the greatest president of the last 60 years. I think he has some childish character traits, such as his need for adoration. He also did many wonderful things. So he had some incredible strengths and incredible weaknesses, the likes of which I'm just completely unaware of. He is a singular personality. He's a kind of a George Steinbrenner type. So yeah, he's got flaws, gaping flaws, and also major strengths, but not particularly adept at governing, not capable of expanding his base. Could he have made better decisions that would have won him re-election? Probably. I think if Steve Bannon had been running his re-election campaign, that Trump would have had a better chance. Trump didn't want a campaign in Arizona because then he couldn't have flown back to the White House and slept in the White House. So if Trump had simply bothered to go to Arizona, and it was only 43,000 votes that cost Trump the election. So just a slight permutation in his re-election strategy might have still pulled it off. Joe Biden was always going to win the popular vote. To what extent is it over for Republicans as we look to 2024? By no means is it over. What is my impression of the psychology of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? Joe Biden strikes me as a popular jock in high school. So that kind of personality. He was a guy who played football in high school. So kind of a jock, someone who says a lot of stupid things, someone very insecure about his IQ. Same with his wife. So insecure about her IQ that she wants everyone to call her doctor, even though she doesn't even have a PhD. She has some kind of education degree. So both Jill and Joe Biden strike me as intellectually mediocre. Kamala Harris, someone who slept away into politics, not a likable person. So I expect that then they're going to have a very difficult job governing competently, and there will be an enormous backlash to them. I expect that Republicans will have sweeping victories in 2022 and 2024. So I don't expect Biden-Harris to be able to govern effectively.
And even soothe or try to bring down that internal state. I don't want you to think about, if you're doing a good job right now or the number of people listening, or let all of that fall secondary to just checking in, seeing if you could recognize.
And the chat says, wow, all this time CNN has been telling the truth. I'm going to order Anderson Cooper's book. No, I'm not telling you that CNN's telling the truth. I'm telling you, don't get in the mindset where everything that CNN tells you is a lie. Don't get in the mindset where everything that the New York Times tells you is a lie. Don't get in the mindset that that entire sectors of the information economy are telling you lies. I read the New York Times and I read dissident right critiques. So read Steve Saylor. Read Anatoly Karlin. Read Paul Gottfried. Read Chronicles magazine. And read the mainstream media. So I'm not telling you the mainstream media has been right all along. I'm saying it is a stupid idea to completely ignore anything that comes from the mainstream media. Read your dissident right material, then contrast it with mainstream media material, and then compare and contrast and make up your own mind. Don't just shut off vast swaths of the information economy because they're left-wing. As Rabbi Hillel says in the Talmud, the wise man learns from everybody.
Recognize the physical sensation of the anxiety and just taking a couple deep breaths and calming it down a little bit. What do you notice right now?
Well, the whole time you were talking, I just was breathing slow and trying to tune in, and it definitely it did calm a little bit in my.
So Holly says, I have no reason to trust the mainstream media analysis of this election based on what they did in 2016. Well, most of the lies about the 2016 election were not given to you by the mainstream media. In a sense, there was a lie in that they put so much emphasis on the Russian collusion hoax, so that was bogus. But you did not read in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times that Russia hacked computers, right? They didn't argue that Russia had changed numbers in the computers. They didn't argue that Trump didn't really win the Electoral College. Now, they had a mistaken emphasis. So understand the left-wing agenda of left-wing publications. But once you understand the agenda, you can decode what they're saying. So it's still worthy listening to perspectives from the other side, and you can simply adjust for their ideological bias. Adjust and then benefit.
My inside, those rushing feelings slowed down. I don't know.
Good. All right. So this is something that
Right. So the New York Times predicted that Hillary Clinton had a 90% chance of winning. But was that really the New York Times? That was one pollster dude at the New York Times who has traditionally underestimated Republican votes. So just because Nate Cohn runs the needle for the New York Times, and his analysis was that Hillary Clinton had a 90% chance of winning, he was wrong. Okay. That doesn't mean that you then discount the New York Times, right? Nate Silver, his prediction was that Trump had about a 20% chance of winning. Okay, so you look at their track record. Some elections they've been closer than other elections, but you don't discount the New York Times just because Nate Cohn was wrong in a prediction, right? You don't stop reading a sports section because they are wrong in their Super Bowl predictions for 5 years running. So put everybody in a genre. Put the New York Times in a genre. Put Luke Ford in a genre. Put Richard Spencer in the genre. Like Luke Ford, I don't know, it's hard to see your own self. But let's say the New York Times is an intelligent left-wing publication and put it in that genre. It's a left-wing source of news. Fox News is a lower brow, centrist to center-right operation. So put it in that genre. Talk radio is a genre that depends on infuriating you about the elites and claiming to be on your side, the little guy against the elites. Okay, that's the genre. It's at least 50% entertainment. And also the Fox News opinion hosts, they also rely on this genre, this shtick. I'm going to fight for you against the elites. Okay, so understand the genre that they're working in. So you don't expect classical music when you tune into a rock station. And you don't expect rock music when you attend a classical symphony. So put publications, put genres like talk radio, TV opinion, TV news. CNN is a center-left organization. MSNBC, I believe, is more to the left. Fox News is a center to center-right news organization. And then they have various opinion hosts who tend to be a little more conservative. So once you situate people in their genre, then they're not going to upset you. They're not going to bother you. Just appreciate people for what they are. I am not as articulate as Richard Spencer. I am not as intelligent as Richard Spencer. I am not as articulate, intelligent as Kevin Michael Grace. Kevin Michael Grace is more well-read, more erudite than I am. He has a more pleasing voice. He is more of a professional with his live streams. All right? I don't have to be better than people. Like Richard Spencer is probably the greatest live streamer of which I'm aware. Like he's very good at that genre. On the other hand, if you follow his advice, it will tend to hurt you. So listen to Richard for entertainment value and appreciate the entertainment value that he brings.
We want to help you get into a habit of on a regular basis. I think what happens is on the inside, you start to really speed up. And if that goes unchecked, then the anxiety is just going to get worse, and it could spill into pain. So one of the things that we want to do is just help you check in when it isn't that bad and bring it back down. But we don't want you to just stop everything you're doing and spend your whole day checking in. But we want you to increase your capacity to recognize when your anxiety is getting away from you.
Sure.
And to bring your attention to it and slow it down. All right, so go on.
Okay, so when I was 6, my mom got remarried, and to who I call my father, and he had legally adopted me and my brother and sister when I was 10.
And comment in the chat that Trump could have marched the mob in there and declared a new government. He didn't have the guts. He's never been that kind of guy. He's never been very good at running anything. So put Trump in his appropriate genre. He's a wonderful entertainer. He has some very good basic instincts, how America needs to restrict immigration and use a more protectionist trade policy. But he's not clever at running things. He's not good at organization. He's not disciplined. He's instinctive.
And then they got divorced when I was 12, which really threw me into another spin of rejection, another father loss, and really was the hardest part of my life, I think, in terms of moving forward and that feeling of
Hold on. I want you to stop again. What's going on right now as you're talking?
I'm getting all those feelings back.
Good. All right. So you see how quick it is? You were able to bring it down. You were able to slow it down. And you returned to what you were talking about. It was maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and already it started rushing back. So I just want you to stop. I just want you to check in. See if you can bring it back down again. Slow it down. Slow everything down. Slow yourself down.
Yes.
Good. All right. And when you feel like you've grounded yourself a little, then just continue.
And the chat says, Luke, why do you doubt that the elites and the liberals hate us? Right-wing critique of them is stupid, but their loathing is beyond doubt. No, it's not beyond doubt, because we don't loathe people who are below us. That's just not how human nature works. We don't get mad at people who are below us. Okay, people who are billionaires don't care about you. They don't hate you. They don't loathe you. They just don't care. Right? We don't loathe people who are below us in social status. We don't hate people who are below us in social status. What we may employ is scorn. But scorn is very different than loathing. Scorn just means these people don't count. Loathing means that you actively want to do harm. But there's absolutely no reason why people in an elite status would bother to loathe you. That's just not how human nature works. We don't loathe people who are below us, who are just dirt beneath our feet. How does the fact that they seem like bugs on a windshield make it better? Scorn is terrible. Scorn simply means that they don't care. And it's not realistic. Why would someone care about you who doesn't know you? Right? They have their own concerns. Like, do you care about the suffering of people in Africa? No, you probably don't lose any sleep about the suffering of people in Africa. You probably don't care about the suffering of people in China. The way human beings are built is that we essentially only care about our in-group. That's true for elites. It's true for non-elites. It's true for the working class as it is for the middle class. It's true for Christians as it is for Jews and for Buddhists and Muslims. We only care about our own group. Right? Elites have their group. And let's say, okay, I'm Jewish. And so sometimes I will socialize with the Jews who are worth tens of millions of dollars. All right? But we have a connection because we're both in the same group. So elites who are in a club with you, in a group with you, who are in your synagogue, may very well care about you. But it's not human nature to care about people you don't know, you don't see. It's pointless. We have limits on how much caring and compassion that we can exhibit or experience, right? Compassion is limited. Caring is limited. It would be contrary to human nature to care and have compassion for people you don't even know. It's absurd to expect that. Just as you don't care about people in Africa or in China, probably don't worry a lot about the Japanese, probably don't worry a lot about indigenous Mexicans. You don't probably worry much about tribes in the Amazon, right? You only care about people in your in-group, your extended family. It's the same way for elites.
What are your experiences on a daily basis?
I'm constantly thinking about how other people are seeing me. I'm super concerned with my looks. Like, I do my makeup and my hair every day, you know. Also, like, I'm always...
Okay, great point in the chat. Why did the SS kill Jews then? So it can be confusing because there is some rhetoric from the Nazis that Jews were vermin, that Jews were below them. But that wasn't the reason that the Nazis killed Jews. It was because they were greatly concerned that Jews posed a threat. That Jews had a blood loyalty that made them formidable was Hitler's thinking.
I'm just constantly aware of how I'm appearing to other people.
How about right now?
Well, no, 'cause I'm alone.
But there's people on the line.
Oh, yeah, I worry about... My biggest worry is sounding intelligent or, you know, seeming competent.
So it really sounds like there's a huge emphasis on either your accomplishments or how other people see you.
Oh, yeah. I've always been, like, the smart one or the pretty one, you know? Like, my mom is always showing us off.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like making us, you know, responsible, like taking responsibility or taking...
So Hitler admired Jews. The conventional wisdom is that Hitler and the Nazis despised Jews and thought they were vermin, but the truth is close to the opposite. Hitler and the Nazis feared Jews because of their high intelligence and drive. I was rereading Paul Johnson's classic work, Modern Times, where he writes, Hitler's aims can be reconstructed not merely from Mein Kampf, with its stress on the East policy, but from his early speeches in the Second or Secret Book of 1928. This material makes it clear that the cleansing process, the elimination of the Jews, was essential to the whole long-term strategy. Being a race socialist as opposed to a class socialist, Hitler believed the dynamic of history was race. The dynamic was interrupted when race poisoning took place. The poison came from the Jews. Hitler admired Jews as negative supermen. In his table talk, he said that if 5,000 Jews emigrated to Sweden, in no time at all, they would occupy all the key positions. This was because of blood purity, as he put it in Mein Kampf. Blood purity is a thing the Jew preserves better than any other people on earth. The Germans, on the other hand, had been poisoned. That was why they lost the First World War. Even Hitler, was poisoned. That was why he occasionally made mistakes. All of us suffer from the sickness of mixed, corrupt blood, according to Adolf.
Taking, like, ownership of our own accomplishments. So, like, this is my daughter, and she has her master's, and you know what I mean? Like, look at how beautiful she is. And so I think that kind of made me hyper aware of how other people are seeing me.
Yeah, so there was more of an emphasis on what you brought to the table than you, like, as an individual.
Yeah.
And so other people's opinions of you have become really important, and it seems like your own opinion of yourself hasn't really come to matter that much.
Totally, yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're very aware of what's going on a logical level.
Oh, yeah, intellectually I understand quite a bit. Absolutely.
So what's the problem?
I guess my timeless right brain doesn't get it. You know?
Yeah. So you understand that. Well, what are your symptoms? We talked earlier in the week, and I remember you telling me that you had fatigue, and there was like a history of anxiety. Is there anything else?
I've had IBS since I was like 16.
Okay.
So that was the first symptom, for sure.
Okay. So you've had IBS. Current.
Okay, a question in the chat. Luke, do you not think that liberals are vicious people? Guess what? Everybody contains a great deal of viciousness. People on the right, people on the left, people in the center, people who are apolitical, Jews, Christians, blacks, whites, Asians, Chinese, Japanese. All human beings have substantial desires to hurt other people for no objective reason, right? The human being is a hurtful being. Every married couple, every member of a married couple deliberately does things to hurt the person that they claim to love more than anyone else in the world. It's called normal marital sadism. It's rampant in virtually all marriages, filled with normal marital sadism. People deliberately hurt the ones they claim to love. Human beings are wired not just to love other people, but to hurt other people. Everybody contains substantial predispositions for viciousness, for hurting others. That's how we built. and we can't eliminate it. You can perhaps tone it down a little bit or moderately. And in some cases, you can tone it down substantially. But there will never be a time when you get past the need, the desire, the inclination to hurt others. There will never be a time when you don't contain a vicious streak. There will never come a time when you are not deliberately hurting the ones you say you love. If you're not aware of how you are deliberately hurting the people that you say you love the most in the world, you're not living in reality. You don't know yourself. You have a complete inability to see yourself objectively. Hurting other people is wired into the human condition, just as is loving other people. You cannot eliminate the desire to be vicious. It will always be there. Always be ready to strike. Right? The human being is fundamentally a hurtful, vicious being, in addition to being a loving being, a generous being. We're inherently selfish and also have inherent predispositions to, at times, be generous. Human beings are complicated. Elites are not exempt from this, and they're not worse than us in this regard. Everybody has substantial predispositions to being vicious, to being sadistic.
Currently, you have fatigue.
Yeah, pretty severe fatigue. Well, not severe. I don't know. It's not that bad, but I have some fatigue, insomnia,
Wow.
which obviously can kind of tie in with the fatigue, I'm sure. Go ahead.
What do you feel like your self-esteem is? Or how do you feel like your self-esteem is?
It's frail. I feel sometimes if I'm doing everything right, if I'm, doing well in things that I care about, then I feel pretty good. But the moment
well, I mean, that's not self-esteem. That's, again, just judging yourself based on your accomplishments.
Okay.
Self-esteem is really just about how you feel about your own self, independent of, like what you see when you look in the mirror, independent of, your GPA or how great of a job you just did, but just the idea, the concept of feeling okay about yourself just for being you, feeling a sense of self-worth or feeling a sense of self-love.
I don't really feel like I exist outside of those things.
Wow. Well, I'm not surprised you have symptoms. It almost seems like, we all have this part of us that yearns to just feel okay the way we are. And if we don't feel okay the way we are, we have a tendency to try to compensate for that by doing well. I think Kobe Bryant is a great example. Or Michael Jordan. If I remember reading Michael Jordan's biography, and it's like he got a 94% on his test, and his mom was like, "Where are the other 6 points?" So what happens? He inherently he feels not good enough the way he is, and he becomes absolutely obsessed, possessed when it comes to winning. He needs to win because it's the only thing that could give him that sense of worth. So
I can relate.
You can relate. How does that sound to you when you actually hear that?
Okay, great question in the chat. Luke, do you think that elites fear white Christian rural traditional Americans, and that is why they attack their ability to organize politically? I think that high IQ people and elites who are much more likely to be cosmopolitan than nationalistic tend to fear nationalism in many of its manifestations. So if you lead a cosmopolitan life, you're going to be concerned about tribalism and nationalism. So I think that elites and highly intelligent people much more likely to live in an abstract world and to be disconnected from traditional ties of blood and soil. Also, there are normal, logical, rational reasons to have concerns about nationalism and racial nationalism. Racial nationalism isn't just a walk in the park. It's not just a phenomenon with only beautiful consequences. There are normal, rational, moral reasons to have some concerns about racial nationalism, just as there are reasons, moral, legal, strong, to have concerns about individualist liberal democracy. There's no one form of government that's only magnificent with no downsides.
Described objectively, I mean, does it sound like positive? Does it sound like something that you're...
And Laponia says, except when nationalism is thousands of miles away in a small sliver of land on another continent. Actually, most Jewish elites don't care that much about Israel. A third of American Jews don't care at all about Israel. Another third of American Jews only care mildly about Israel. So elites do not tend to be nationalist. Whether they're Jewish or Christian, Spanish, that's just the nature of living in an abstract world. The university, for example, is about the least nationalist place in a first world country.
You know, drawn to? Does it sound repugnant?
No, it sounds like something I'm drawn to.
It does. Okay, so
yeah,
this is actually something that I have come across a lot. It's that, like, for you, external validation is like a drug.
absolutely.
You love it. You want to go in situations where, you know, like, guys are going to find you attractive, or you're going to be able to achieve or accomplish something, because that's what makes you feel good about yourself.
Right. I hate admitting that, but yeah.
What do you think that subcommunicates to yourself?
Just that my view of myself doesn't matter as much as anyone else's.
Yeah. It's almost like you, to some degree, you have like you know, an addiction, like a heroin addiction or something. It feels really good in the moment, but it fades, and then you need it again.
So, question in the chat. Luke, I have a huge problem with being overly empathic. Well, look up empathy. Katie Morton did a great video on empathy. You can be too empathic. There are times when you need to be cold and unempathic. And then there are other times when it serves you to have some empathy. So in most of your interactions with people, it will help if you have a little bit of empathy. People who have no empathy are not going to get along very well with other people. But you can be so flooded with empathy that you become useless, or you're not able to act in your own self-interest. Luke, why do I think human societies have tried to create institutions like church and psychotherapy? Because they meet inherent human needs. Luke, American politics have never been this vicious. Actually, I think they have been. So I think if you read American history, you'll find times when politics have been vicious. Remember the Civil War? 700,000 Americans died in the Civil War? It's pretty vicious. Justice for Lieutenant Ashley Babbitt. She was an idiot. She believed in idiotic things like QAnon. She behaved idiotically. No sane person should have participated in that rush on the nation's capital and its institutions, and she should not have led the way into a protected area where there were law enforcement with guns out. That's insane. Yes, highly agreeable, empathic people exist, but agreeableness and empathy aren't traits that just always serve you and that you can't have too much of. In some circumstances in life, empathy and agreeableness serves you, and in other instances, it handicaps you. Luke, aren't you contradicting yourself by acknowledging that elites fear nationalists? No. If nationalism appears like a threat, they're going to fear it. If nationalism is inconsequential, they're not going to fear it. When nationalism is nothing as a force, they're not going to spend probably a lot of time thinking about it. Luke, why are you so angry at these streamers? Streaming takes a tremendous amount of energy. So if I can kind of tap into sometimes disgust, sometimes revulsion, sometimes contempt, will supply one with energy. And if it is appropriately directed, it can serve you. Inappropriately directed, it will hurt you. Come on, Luke, she was an ordinary woman. That's not an ordinary woman who's into all these conspiracy theories and flies to the other side of the country to participate in political activism and then leads the way into trying to get into a secure part of Capitol Hill where there are law enforcement officers out with guns. Look, you said elites don't fear us. Elites don't fear you, Ricardo. Elites don't fear me. Look, they fear effective forms of nationalism, right? If you're not a substantial person of great accomplishment, they're not going to fear you. But if you are part of an organization that is overturning their political or economic system, then they fear that wider organization. They don't care about you as an individual unless you are a substantial figure who threatens them. We don't fear those below us. But if 1 million people below us start effectively organizing, then of course they're going to start fearing. What's wrong with like invading Capitol Hill and running over the police and going into places illegally and then trying to make your way into highly protected areas where there are law enforcement officers with guns? It's idiotic to provoke conflict with people who have guns. It's idiotic to pressure people who have guns. Don't do it. It's stupid. You could lose your life. The more pressure you put on people, the worse decisions they're going to make. So don't be disrespectful to people who have guns.
Yeah.
Well, is it worth it?
Well, from where I stand now, right this very second, yes.
Why?
Because it feels so good in that moment.
Your body's rebelling, though.
It totally is.
Your body is rebelling. It doesn't like feeling totally devoid of any self-love and needing to like fill up like a gas station.
Yeah.
If you can flip a switch and all of a sudden get that.
And a question in the chat, blackmailing American politicians for Israel is okay. I don't spend a great deal of time talking about which political tactics are moral or immoral. I'll talk about behavior that is effective or not effective. Blackmailing American politicians for Israel is okay, depending on your perspective. If you're Israel first, it's okay. If you're America first, it's not okay. Blackmailing Japanese politicians for China is okay if you're Chinese first. It's not okay if you're Japanese first. It all depends upon the perspective of the observer. The observer is a crucial point of the data here.
That feeling of self-love and not need this external validation as much, would you?
Absolutely.
You would?
Yes.
Why?
Because I don't like having to rely on outside sources for my sense of worth. I mean, it would just be nice to be able to feel that myself rather than relying on unstable sources outside, you know? Like.
Okay. I mean, I hear you. Do you believe what you're saying right now?
I don't know, dude. Like I said, intellectually, like I get it, but right?
Yes.
I want to get it. Like I want to feel that. I want to, but
it's like you're living your life always waiting for the next fix and never really truly feeling safe. Because you know as soon as it goes away, you're going to feel empty again.
Yeah.
And it actually requires reaching a certain point where you just say to yourself, I'm done living like that, and making an active choice to see that validation there and actually choose